Enched between teeth, unlit. Clean. The river swallowed evidence, but truths don't sink so easily. Elias, you spoke of mercy back there. Who showed it to you first, in that cell? Elias paused, leaning against a lamppost as gas flames hissed their last before daylight quenched them. His haunted eyes met Holmes's, voice rough as gravel, a visitor in the dark before the trial. Whispered of grace beyond the rope. Cut it while guards slept, said the shadows owed me a debt. But his face, blurred by hood and fear. Lydia's grip tightened on Thorpe's arm, her widow's veil torn and muddied, dark hair escaping in wild strands. Harlan, you knew of visitors. The logs you burned, did one name stand out? Thorpe's scowl crumpled, sweat beading despite the chill. Father Elias. No, not blood but the prison chaplain, Reverend Josiah Blackwood, my wife's brother. He came pleading for your soul, Hawthorne. I turned him away, but... The keys went missing that shift. A chill wind gusted from the river, carrying the faint rot of low tide. Blackwood, Lydia's brother. Holmes's pulse quickened, deduction snapping into place. The journal's margins bore faint ink, matching a cleric's script. Reverend Josiah Blackwood, her late husband. No, brother, as Thorpe said. Seeds planted. Lydia's mysterious arrivals at Newgate, her pleas dismissed as grief. The tempter Silas had called her a harbinger, but perhaps she bridged worlds, faith against fanaticism. Gregson halted, face hardening. Blackwood, the holy man who blessed the gallows. Scotland Yard cleared him, alibi with the bishop, if he's the cutter. We end this at Newgate, Holmes interjected, voice steel, before the demolition crew swings their hammers. The final hanging proceeds at noon, symbolic for the prison's ghosts. But if Blackwood lurks, he brings the true noose. They pressed on, carriages parting as Gregson flashed his badge. Newgate loomed ahead. Its grim walls etched black against the paling sky, crows wheeling overhead like mourners. The air thickened with coal smoke and the tang of fresh lime mortar, workers already hauling beams for the wrecking. Inside the gates, the yard buzzed, condemned souls echoes in the wind, but today marked closure. Or so the crowd gathering beyond the bars believed. Lydia's breath caught as they entered the shadowed corridor to the chapel, sanctuary of repentance, its stained glass depicting prodigal sons and risen saviors, now cracked from years of damp. Reverend Josiah Blackwood knelt at the altar, white hair haloed by candlelight, hands clasped over a frayed rope coiled like a serpent. He rose slowly, face gaunt with the same scars as Elias, though finer, self-inflicted perhaps in penance. Josiah, her voice broke, soft as prayer. You never told me. Sister, he murmured, eyes lifting with weary fire. The rope refused because grace intervened. I saw in Elias what London ignored, a man broken by our sins, not his. The cult twisted old rites. I twisted faith to counter them. Thorpe's corruption fed the depths. I cut the chain to starve it. Thorpe recoiled in his irons, voice a rasp. You damned us all, parson. My bribes kept the peace, peace built on graves, Josiah snapped, advancing. Silas was my shadow once, brother in zeal gone mad. I atoned by saving one soul, proving redemption real. Holmes stepped forward, journal thrust open to the manifests. Your script, Reverend. You shipped relics to silence rivals, then played savior. Logic unmasks you. The ropes weave from your vestry stores cut by hands that blessed it. Josiah's laugh echoed hollow. Logic, Mr. Holmes. You've chased phantoms, but grace defies your microscope. Elias lived to testify, Thorpe confesses. Silas drowns. The river sated, Newgate falls. My test passed. Elias gripped the knife at his belt, knuckles white, but held. You gave me breath, parson. But mercy demands truth. Did you kill the victims to frame me? Silence stretched, candles guttering. Josiah's eyes dimmed. No. I witnessed Thorpe's hand in one. A debtor silenced. The rest. Cult's work. I cut to redeem what I couldn't save. Watson drew his revolver, steady. Enough riddles. Gregson, arrest him. But Holmes raised a hand, detachment fracturing as he met Josiah's gaze. You've planted faith where I sowed doubt. The pattern completes. Corruption's cycle broken not by deduction alone, but choice. Elias chooses mercy. Thorpe, confession. You, atonement. Lydia knelt beside her brother, tears tracing paths through grime. We've all hung by threads, Josiah. Let justice weave us back. Gregson hesitated, then nodded constables forward. You're under caution, Reverend. But Holmes, this one's yours to unravel in court. As irons clicked on Josiah's wrists, the chapel bells tolled noon, vibrating through stone. Outside, the crowd roared for the symbolic hanging, a dummy on the gallows, rope snapping taut, then fraying in wind, refusing to break as if echoing the miracle. Demolition hammers rang first blows, walls shuddering. Holmes watched from the yard. Pipe finally lit, smoke curling heavenward. Inner walls crumbled too. Watson, old friend, perhaps grace is the deduction we missed. Watson clapped his back, eyes misting. You've mended more than cases today. Elias stood tall beside Lydia, hand on Thorpe's shoulder, a fragile circle forming. Yet as dust rose from falling stone, Holmes spied a final shadow slipping the gate, a courier with Silas's mark. Clutching a sealed missive, the river yields one last hunger. Thorpe paled. My ledger, hidden in the foundation, if it surfaces. The true depths call, Holmes murmured, eyes narrowing. One revelation remains before Newgate breathes free. Holmes's eyes locked on the courier's retreating form, a wiry shadow darting through the thickening dust clouds rising from Newgate's crumbling walls. The man's coat flapped like ragged wings. The sealed missive clutched to his chest, as if it held the prison's dying breath. Around them, the demolition crew swung hammers with rhythmic fury, each blow sending tremors through the yard, cracking stone that had witnessed centuries of despair. Elias tensed beside Lydia, his scarred hand instinctively reaching for the knife he no longer carried, while Thorpe's face drained to the color of wet ash, his portly frame sagging against a constable's grip. Watson felt the familiar surge of adrenaline from Afghan battlefields, his revolver heavy in his pocket, but Holmes was already moving, long strides cutting through the chaos with predatory grace. The pipe dropped from his lips, forgotten in the gravel. Not deduction this time, he thought, but instinct, a pull toward the unfinished pattern. Gregson barked orders, constables scattering like hounds, but Holmes waved them off with a sharp gesture. This thread unravels by my hand alone. The courier bolted toward the outer gate, where the crowd pressed against iron barriers, their cheers for the frayed dummy noose turning to murmurs as dust choked the air. Gas lamps sputtered in the perpetual fog, casting elongated shadows that danced like spectres from the Thames' murky underbelly. Holmes vaulted a fallen beam, his deerstalker askew, heart pounding not from exertion, but from the fracture in his rational armor. Faith, he mused bitterly, the detective's greatest foe, yet here it chased him through London's grime. He cornered the man in a narrow alley off Newgate Street, the walls slick with coal soot and recent rain, the air thick with the rot of overflowing gutters. The courier spun, eyes wild under a low-brimmed hat, breath ragged. You can't have it, detective. Silas's last command, burn it if they come. Holmes pinned him against the brick with a forearm, grey eyes boring into fear-dilated pupils. Silas, the drowned tempter, whispers from the grave, hand it over or the river claims another soul. The man trembled, fumbling the missive free. It's the ledger, names, dates, the cult's tithes to Thorpe, Hawthorne's frame, the missing girls, all to bury debts in blood oaths. But there's more. A map to the true altar beneath the foundations. Holmes snatched the parchment, breaking the wax seal stamped with a coiled serpent, Silas's mark. Unfolding it under the alley's dim gaslight, he scanned the cramped script. Payments from shadowy nobles, rituals in forgotten crypts, Thorpe's signature entwined with occult symbols. And at the center, a sketch of Newgate's undercroft, arrows pointing to a hidden chamber where the rope's miracle was forged. Not divine, but alchemical forgery, ropes treated with rare resins to snap on command, faking supernatural stays for the cult's propaganda. Yet woven among the crimes was a confession in Thorpe's own hand. I sold my soul for position, but Hawthorne's innocence gnaws eternal. The parson knew Josiah Blackwood, Lydia's kin, fed me victims to expose the rot only to become it. Blackwood, The name struck like a revelation. Lydia's brother, the angel figure cloaked in clerical robes, his sermons laced with double meaning. Holmes's mind raced, piecing the arc. Josiah's motivation, not pure salvation, but vengeance masked as grace, pulling Elias from the abyss only to test the detective's limits. Back in the yard, as hammers felled another wall, Holmes thrust the ledger toward Gregson. Arrest warrants for half the city's underbelly. Thorpe orchestrated the frame, Josiah the counterstroke. But the true killer? Silas's cult, with Thorpe as patron, drowned their own to silence ripples. Thorpe collapsed to his knees in the dust, chains rattling. Mercy, Holmes, my daughters. No, Governor. Mercy was Elias's choice today. Yours is the scaffold of truth. Elias stepped forward, haunted eyes now steady, the wild hair matted with sweat but his posture unbowed. You've all danced on my grave, but I choose life without the blade. Lydia, sister, forgive the years I left you in shadow. She embraced him fiercely, tears carving clean lines through the grime on her cheeks. Blood binds, Elias, but grace heals. Josiah sought to save us both, twisted as his path. Josiah, led from the chapel in irons, paused at the group's edge, his once fiery gaze subdued, scars of self-inflicted penance visible on his wrists. Brother, the knife stayed your hand. Faith isn't flawless, it's forged in fire. I've atoned enough to see that. Gregson nodded grimly, signalling the wagon. Scotland Yard cleans house today. Holmes, you're a devil with patterns, but this mends souls. Not just cases. Watson watched his friend, the gaunt frame silhouetted against falling stone, pipe relit at last, smoke mingling with demolition haze. You've changed, Sherlock. Reason bent to something higher. Holmes exhaled slowly, the acrid tobacco grounding him amid the upheaval. Perhaps, John, or perhaps the greatest deduction, no man stands alone. Corruption's cycle breaks not by logic's blade, but shared light piercing the fog. As Newgate's final tower groaned and toppled, sending a plume of dust skyward like a funeral pyre, the crowd hushed. The dummy rope, frayed and defiant, fluttered in the breeze, a symbol reclaimed. Elias walked free, arm linked with Lydia's, toward a hansom cab vanishing into London's labyrinth. Thorpe was carted away, mumbling of ledgers and lost fortunes. Josiah's wagon rolled toward trial, his head bowed in quiet reflection. Holmes lingered with Watson amid the rubble, the Thames lapping hungrily nearby, its waters sated for now. One shadow remains, he murmured, glancing at the Undercroft map. But today restoration claims victory. Inner walls rebuild stronger, cracked though they be. Watson smiled faintly, clapping his shoulder. To Baker Street, then. Mrs. Hudson awaits with tea, and perhaps a sermon on grace. The fog swallowed them as hammers echoed finality, Newgate's ghosts dispersing into history's mist. Yet in Holmes's piercing gaze, a new light flickered, not of gas lamps but something eternal, hinting at journeys yet uncharted. The Thames whispered secrets to the receding tide, but for the first time, Holmes listened not as foe, but fellow traveller. Redemption's rope, it seemed, refused to break for any soul willing to grasp it. And in the quiet aftermath, as stars pierced the clearing sky, a fragile hope settled over the ruins, like dawn after endless night. Subscribe for more cases that test your deduction skills. The noose tightened around Elias Hawthorne's neck, rough hemp biting into the raw skin beneath his collar, like the teeth of some ancient beast. Rain slicked the wooden scaffold of Newgate execution yard, turning the planks treacherous under the hangman's heavy boots. He stood there, 42 years carved into his hollowed frame, wild black hair plastered to his scarred forehead, those haunted blue eyes scanning the sea of faces blurred by fog and his own blurring tears. The crowd pressed against the iron rails, labourers in threadbare coats, top-hatted gentry with handkerchiefs to their noses, women clutching rosaries and whispering prayers. Gas lamps sputtered along the prison's towering stone walls, casting long shadows that danced like demons in the perpetual twilight of 1887 London. Elias's heart hammered, a frantic drum against his ribs, each beat flashing memories. His wife's fevered face in the cholera ward, little Sarah's tiny hand slipping from his as he staggered into the gin-soaked night. The dockside brawls that left his cheek gashed forever. Wrongly accused of those Ripper-like murders in Whitechapel, bodies drained, throats slashed, he'd confessed nothing, only begged for a priest who never came. Governor Harlan Thorpe stepped forward, portly belly straining his brass-buttoned uniform, slick hair gleaming under the drizzle. His scowl deepened as he unfolded the parchment, voice booming oily and authoritative over the murmurs. "Final words, Hawthorne, make them count." Elias swallowed, throat dry as ash. "Tell Sarah, her da loves her, ain't no monster, just a man who fell." The crowd shifted, a low growl rising, some jeering, others silent, sensing the wrongness in the air. Thorpe nodded curtly to the hooded executioner, who pulled the lever with a metallic groan. The trapdoor yawned open. Elias dropped, the world exploding into white-hot agony as the rope snapped taut. His neck didn't break. No merciful crack, no sudden dark. Just fire lancing through his spine, his body jerking like a puppet on strings, legs kicking wildly over the void. Gasps rippled through the throng, then screams. The rope held unyielding as if woven from iron instead of hemp. He dangled there, vision spotting black, lungs burning for air that wouldn't come, thoughts a whirlwind. God? Why? After all the rot I've poured into this life? The executioner scrambled, fumbling with the rope, but it refused to give. Thorpe's face purpled, bellowing orders. "Cut him down, you fools." Scotland Yard men pushed through, Inspector Tobias Gregson at their fore, his lean frame cutting the crowd like a knife, rumpled suit-soaked, cynical eyes narrowing. From the shadows near the prison gate, Sherlock Holmes watched, tall and gaunt in his Inverness cape, deerstalker pulled low over piercing grey eyes. Beside him, Dr. John Watson gripped his umbrella tighter, moustache twitching with unease. "Extraordinary," Holmes murmured, pipe clenched between thin lips. "The rope should have severed the vertebrae instantly. Physics doesn't lie." Watson glanced at him, military bearing stiff. "Superstition, Holmes. The crowd's whispering devil's work already. Look at them." Holmes's aquiline nose flared, inhaling the reek of coal smoke, wet wool and fear sweat. "No, Watson. Precision failure. Calculate the drop. 12 feet for a man his weight. Yet it holds." He lit his pipe, the match flaring briefly against the gloom, illuminating the sharp planes of his face. Thorpe's men finally hauled Elias up, his body limp but breathing in ragged gasps, blue eyes fluttering open to stare at the sky as if seeing judgment deferred. The yard erupted in chaos. Women fainted into arms, men shouted for a retrial or a miracle. Thorpe shoved through, sweat beading on his jowls despite the chill. "This is no spectacle," he roared. "Hawthorne dies tomorrow at dawn, properly this time." Gregson confronted him, voice weary and edged. "Governor, the press will feast on this. Rope refused to break? Public's calling it divine intervention." Thorpe's eyes darted, small and piggish. "Nonsense, faulty knot. My prison, my rules." Holmes stepped forward then, cane tapping the wet stones, drawing every gaze. "Governor Thorpe, if I may, Sherlock Holmes, consulting detective." "A word?" Thorpe bristled, recognizing the name. "Holmes, Scotland Yard's pest. This is official business." Holmes's grey eyes bored in, unblinking. "Precisely why I'm here. On invitation from your own Inspector Lestrade, who smells rot in these walls." Watson nodded confirmation, kind eyes scanning the scaffold. Elias lay sprawled now on the planks, chest heaving, a warden pressing a rag to his bruised throat. Through the haze, his gaze locked on Holmes, pleading, desperate. Thorpe waved dismissively. "Tomorrow's hanging proceeds. Leave it." But Holmes was already moving, ascending the steps with predatory grace, Watson close behind. Up close the rope was pristine, no frays, no slips. Holmes ran gloved fingers along it, inhaling deeply. Fresh tar, standard issue, weight tested yesterday per records. He turned to the executioner, who shrank back. "Your name?" "Jeremiah, sir. Swear it was right." Holmes nodded absently, mind whirring like a Babbage engine. Elias coughed, voice a gravel rasp, cockney thick with pain. "Ain't my doing. God spared me. Prove it, for they string me again." Holmes paused, something flickering in those detached eyes. Curiosity, perhaps the first crack in his rational armour. God, Mr. Hawthorne, or something more. Earthly. As the crowd dispersed into the thickening fog, horse-drawn carriages clattering away over cobblestones, Watson pulled Holmes aside near the yard's arched gateway. The man's innocent. Holmes. Those eyes. Terror, not guilt. Holmes puffed his pipe, smoke curling like ghosts. Innocence is deduced, not felt, my dear Watson. But this defies deduction. Thorpe's haste, Gregson's reluctance, the rope's defiance, Newgate's final hanging, announced months ago before demolition. Too many anomalies. Watson's face softened, thinking of his own Afghan scars, the fragility of life. And if it's supernatural? Holmes's lip curled faintly. Then science has a new frontier. Inside the prison's dim visitation room later that evening, stone walls slick with condensation, a single gas jet flickering, Elias slumped in irons at a scarred oak table. The air hung heavy with mould and despair. Opposite him sat a woman in widow's black raven hair pinned severely, green eyes steady as a vicar's sermon. Lydia Blackwood, prison volunteer. You've endured hell today, Elias. But endurance is the first step to grace. He laughed bitterly, short and jagged. Grace? Lady, I lost that in the gin mills. My Sarah thinks me a killer. Lydia leaned closer, voice gentle, measured. Grace finds the lost. Pray with me. He recoiled, but her hand on his chained wrist steadied him, warm against the cold iron. For the first time in years, words formed unbidden. Lord, if you're listening. Holmes and Watson entered then, shadows lengthening. Lydia rose gracefully. Mr. Holmes. The Lord provides investigators too. Holmes arched a brow. Madam, the Lord provides data. Elias eyed him warily. You gonna save me, detective? So I'll just scribble notes. Holmes sat elbows on table, voice cool. I'll unravel why that rope held, Hawthorne. Start with the night of the first murder, every detail. As Elias spoke, haltingly, of fog-choked alleys and shadows that weren't his, Holmes's mind pieced shadows of its own. Corruption in high places, a frame job reeking of Thorpe's ambition. Outside, rain lashed the streets, but inside Elias, a spark kindled amid the ashes. Not hope yet, but question. Why me? Why now? Watson watched Holmes work, loyalty deepening, sensing the detective's own hidden fractures, the cocaine haze in Baker Street nights, the void no violin could fill. This case would test more than ropes, yet as they left, a whisper reached them from the cell block. Thorpe's voice, low and venomous to Gregson. End Hawthorne quietly. No more miracles. Holmes paused in the doorway, pipe glowing. Watson, tomorrow we return. The truth awaits, and it wears a governor's uniform. This story is created by a young creator whose dream is to reach 1,000 subscribers. If you enjoy these tales, subscribing helps more than you know, and he thanks you for it. Mysteries that challenge your mind and reward attention lie ahead. Rain hammered the cobblestones of Old Bailey, like judgment from an unforgiving sky, turning the streets into rivers of muck that splashed against carriage wheels. Sherlock Holmes strode through the gloom, his Inverness cape slick with water, pipe clenched between teeth as tendrils of tobacco smoke mingled with the fog. Beside him, Watson huddled under an umbrella, moustache drooping, his mind churning over the interview in Newgate's dim visitation room. Elias Hawthorne's tale had been a ragged tapestry of desperation, foggy alleys, screams that echoed wrong, shadows twisting like accusations. But Holmes's grey eyes burned with the cold fire of deduction, sifting lies from leads. They reached Baker Street as thunder grumbled overhead, Mrs. Hudson clucking her tongue at the puddle trailing behind them. Watson shook off his coat, glancing at Holmes, who was already shrugging into his dressing gown, violin case under arm. The detective's room smelled of shag tobacco and chemical experiments, vials bubbling faintly on the sideboard. You heard Thorpe, Holmes, that whisper. End Hawthorne quietly. No more miracles. It's not just incompetence, it's malice. Holmes struck a match, the flame dancing across his hawkish features before he lit his pipe. Precisely, Watson. Governor Harlan Thorpe, 53, portly frame straining his waistcoat, ambition as bloated as his belly. Appointed to Newgate amid whispers of graft, funds for the condemned's last meals vanishing into pockets lined with silk, the hanging failure exposes him, a rope that refuses to snap, preposterous unless tampered, but Hawthorne's eyes, haunted, not hollowed by guilt. Innocence flickers there, buried under gin and grief. Watson poured brandy, the liquid glinting amber in gaslight. And Lydia Blackwood? That widow's calm unnerved me. Praying with a man hours from the noose, she sees grace where we see evidence. Holmes paced, robe swirling. Sentiment, Watson. Yet her presence intrigues. Raven hair, green eyes sharp as emeralds, mid-30s, widowed young. Husband lost to the Thames, or so the records say. Volunteers at Newgate funded by unexplained wealth. A variable worth observing. Sleep evaded them both that night. Watson dreamed of ropes coiling like serpents, Elias's scarred face pleading amid prison stones, slick with condensation. Holmes lay motionless, mind a whirlwind, reconstructing the murders. First victim, Elias Hawthorne, throat slashed in Whitechapel fog, October 1886. No weapon found, footprints vanishing into mist. Second, Tom Riley, docker, gutted near the docks, eyes frozen in terror. Hawthorne's knife in his hovel, blood not quite dry, framed perhaps by Thorpe's order, silencing a man who knew too much about pilfered prison ledgers. Dawn broke grey and sodden, horse hooves clopping as they hailed a hansom back to Newgate. The prison loomed like a blackened tooth against the skyline, its walls etched with centuries of screams. Guards nodded warily at Holmes's card, leading them past clanging gates to the governor's office. Harlan Thorpe rose from his desk, jowls quivering, eyes darting like a cornered rat. Mr. Holmes, Scotland Yard's pet bloodhound. To what do I owe this intrusion? Holmes scanned the room, ledgers stacked unevenly, ink stains fresh, a half-burned document curling in the grate. Governor, your hanging malfunctioned spectacularly. Public outcry swells. The Times calls it divine intervention. Care to explain the rope's inexplicable elasticity? Thorpe's laugh barked short, forced. Superstition, sir, inferior hemp from the supplier. Hawthorne's neck stretched it. Guilty wretch deserved worse. We'll retry at week's end privately. Watson noted the sweat beading on Thorpe's brow despite the chill. And the whispers of Hawthorne's innocence? Witnesses recanting? Thorpe slammed a fist on oak. Lies from gin-soaked fools. Gregson has the case airtight. Speak of the devil, Inspector Tobias. Gregson slouched in then, lean frame rumpled, cynical eyes narrowing. Holmes? Still chasing ghosts? We've got motive, weapon, prints. Hawthorne's a killer plain. Holmes leaned forward, voice silk over steel. Prints? In 1887, Gregson. Scotland Yard's vaunted science lags. Tell me, Inspector, why rush the execution before full autopsy on Riley? Gregson shifted, uncomfortable. Thorpe's orders. Budget strains. Thorpe interjected, voice oily. Gentlemen, the matter's closed. Leave, or I'll summon constables. They departed, but Holmes paused in the corridor, ear to a grate. Faint voices drifted up, Thorpe to a minion, double the watch on Hawthorne. No visitors, especially that Blackwood witch. Outside, the yard reeked of damp straw and despair, condemned men shuffling in exercise rings under shotgun eyes. Watson gripped Holmes's arm. Thorpe's hiding something rotten. But Hawthorne, did you see his hands tremble recounting the alley? Not fear of death, but memory. Holmes nodded, mind alight. Trauma, Watson, or truth. We need the crime scenes. Their next stop, Whitechapel, heart of the fog's embrace. Gas lamps hissed feebly against perpetual twilight, prostitutes calling from doorways, children ragged and feral scavenging gutters. The alley where Eliza died was narrow, walls weeping moisture, crates splintered where her body fell. Holmes knelt, fingers tracing faint scuffs, boot marks mismatched to Hawthorne's worn soles. See here? Larger foot, military tread. Thorpe served in India, did he not? Watson shivered, breath clouding. Coincidence? No such thing. And the angle of the slash, left-handed. Hawthorne's right dominant. Scars on knuckles from brawls prove it. A shadow detached from the wall. Lydia Blackwood veiled in black, umbrella shielding her from drizzle. Gentlemen. Providence again. Holmes straightened, intrigued despite himself. Madam, alleys are no place for charity. She smiled faintly, green eyes piercing. Elias spoke of this spot. Said the shadow whispered his name before striking. Not a man's voice. Watson frowned. Hysteria from drink. Or witness to frame, Holmes murmured, pulse quickening. Lydia, you've access. Hawthorne's cell. Any oddities? She hesitated. Then, a scrap of paper slipped under his door last night. Burned edges, symbol, a coiled rope. Thorpe's seal, Holmes deduced. Threat or clue? Back at Newgate by dusk. They bluffed past lax guards. Holmes's forged pass from Gregson's own style. Elias's cell was a tomb of stone and iron, fetid air thick with mould. He huddled on his pallet, chains rattling, wild black hair matted. You came back. Thought prayers scared you off. Holmes crouched, examining the floor. The paper, Hawthorne? Elias slid it from his sleeve, trembling fingers unfolding char. Found it after lights out. Says repent or the rope remembers. Watson paled. Blackmail. Lydia slipped in shadows behind them, her volunteer pass unquestioned. Knelt by Elias. Fear not. The Lord breaks chains stronger than these. Elias's haunted eyes met hers, voice cracking. My Sarah. She visited once, spat venom. Thinks me monster. If I hang, her life's ash. Holmes pocketed the scrap. Mind racing. Sarah Hawthorne, wife, laundress in Spitalfields. We'll speak with her. But first, Gregson, his rivalry blinds him. But loyalty to Thorpe? A key turned. Guards bursting in, batons raised. Intruders, Thorpe's orders, no one. Holmes sprang, disarming one with a twist. Watson fending the other with physician's steady fists. Lydia pressed against Elias protectively, whispering urgently. Hold faith. They fled into the labyrinthine halls, echoes pursuing, bursting into the rain-lashed yard. Gregson waited with constables, pistol drawn. End of the line, Holmes. But Holmes's voice cut sharp. Inspector, arrest Thorpe. That paper bears his mark, and footprints in Whitechapel match your boots. Gregson faltered, face ashen. Lies. Truth doesn't lie, Holmes retorted. Choose now, justice or the governor's purse. Tension coiled like the rope itself, rain sheeting down, as Gregson's hand wavered on the trigger. In the distance, chapel bells tolled vespers, a sombre knell amid the storm. Elias, alone in his cell once more, clutched Lydia's whispered promise, a small wooden cross. For the first time, prayer felt less like chains, more like breath. But as shadows lengthened, a new whisper slithered under the door. The hangings tomorrow. No miracles left. Rain hammered the cobblestones of Newgate's yard like divine judgment, turning the ground to slick mud that sucked at their boots. Gregson's hand trembled on the pistol grip, his cynical gaze flickering between Holmes's unyielding stare and the shadowed prison walls where guards hovered like spectres. Thorpe's corruption hung in the air, thicker than the coal smoke drifting from London's distant chimneys, but Gregson's face twisted with the raw conflict of a man caught between ambition and an inkling of conscience. Holmes stepped forward, voice steady as a surgeon's scalpel. Inspector, your boots leave a distinctive tread. Deep heel, worn leather from those cheap Spitalfield stalls. They match the prints beside the mutilated body in Miller's court. Thorpe paid you to look away, didn't he? Or was it to plant evidence pinning Hawthorne? Gregson swallowed hard, rain tracing rivulets down his lean cheeks. You're grasping at shadows. Holmes, Thorpe's no saint, but Hawthorne's guilt reeks worse than this yard. Watson, fist still clenched from the scuffle inside, edged closer, his military bearing a quiet anchor. Think of the families, Gregson. If the wrong man's neck stretches tomorrow, it's on all our souls. From the cell block's gloom, Lydia emerged, her dark cloak sodden, clutching the wooden cross she'd given Elias. Her voice carried softly yet unyieldingly through the storm. The Lord sees what men bury, Inspector. Elias Hawthorne carries chains heavier than iron, innocence twisted into accusation. Gregson lowered the pistol a fraction, jaw clenching. Get out, all of you, before I regret this mercy. But Holmes, Find proof by dawn, or I wash my hands of it. They scattered into the night, Holmes leading them through twisting alleys where gas lamps sputtered like dying stars. The city's pulse throbbed around them, distant cries of newsboys hawking headlines of the failed hanging, the clip-clop of hansoms ferrying the oblivious elite. Watson glanced back at the prison's looming silhouette, its for demolition sign a mocking epitaph. That place devours souls, Holmes. Hawthorne's eyes, they've seen hell. Holmes's mind whirred, piecing fragments. Not hell, Watson. Human malice dressed as the supernatural, the rope that refused to break last month, frayed by sabotage, not spirits. But Thorpe's note to Elias. That's personal. Their path led to Spitalfields, the laundress district where steam rose from vats like ghosts from graves. Sarah Hawthorne's tenement squatted amid rows of sagging buildings, its single window glowing faintly. They knocked, and the door creaked open to reveal a woman in her late 30s, gaunt as winter branches, with ash-blonde hair pinned haphazardly and hands raw from lye. Her eyes, red-rimmed, hardened at the sight of Holmes's deerstalker. "What do you lot want?" Sarah spat, voice laced with East End grit, vowels flattened by years of survival. "If it's pity for my butcher husband, save it." Holmes removed his hat, rain dripping from the brim. "Mrs. Hawthorne, your husband's life hangs by dawn. We're not here to bury him in rumour." She ushered them in grudgingly, the room a stifling cave of damp laundry strung on lines, the air heavy with soap and despair. A single candle flickered on a scarred table, casting shadows that danced like accusations. Sarah sank onto a stool, arms crossed over her threadbare apron. Elias? Innocent? He came home nights reeking of gin and blood, eyes wild. Said the devil drove him. Then the girls, throats slashed, just like Jack's work. Lydia knelt beside her, gentle as a confessor. "Grief blinds us, Sarah, but truth frees." "Did he ever speak of Governor Thorpe?" Sarah's gaze darted, fingers twisting a rag. "Thorpe. Came sniffing round after the first arrest, offered coin to keep quiet. Said Elias was guilty as sin, rope or no. But that night, the hanging failed. I saw lights in his office till dawn. Watson leaned against the wall, moustache twitching with unease. The rope snapped clean through. They say, no man could rig that." Holmes paced, aquiline nose flaring as he inhaled the room's secrets. Not snapped. Sawed beforehand, fibers examined under lens show tool marks. But the timing. Thorpe knew Elias's screams mimicked the victim's. Planted evidence to close Ripper cases before Newgate shuts. Sarah's facade cracked, a sob escaping. He weren't no Ripper. Loved our boy, Tommy. Till the drink stole him. Tommy died coughing blood 2 winters back, phthisis. Elias broke then, haunting taverns for forgetfulness. But murder? Never. Lydia placed a hand on her shoulder, voice warm with conviction. "Faith mends what vice shatters, Sarah. Come with us to the chapel tomorrow. Pray for clarity before the noose." She shook her head fiercely. "Pray." God turned deaf when Tommy wheezed his last. Elias chose his path. Outside, the rain eased to a drizzle, fog rolling in like a shroud. Holmes turned to Watson as they walked toward Baker Street. Sarah's rag, lie burns matched those on the forged note's edge. Thorpe's laundering Thorpe's own threats. But Watson's thoughts lingered on Elias, alone in that fetid cell. The man's not just fighting rope, he's wrestling demons inside. You see genius in clues, Holmes, but what of the soul? Holmes paused under a gas lamp, grey eyes reflecting the flame's flicker. Souls are deductions too, Watson. Messy, irrational. Yet tonight, I glimpsed mine falter. If Thorpe wins, justice dies with Newgate. Dawn crept over the Thames, grey light piercing the smog. Back at the prison gates, Gregson met them, face haggard, rumpled suit bearing overnight creases. Thorpe's vanished. Office ransacked. Note says he's fled to the docks. Holmes's lips thinned. Then we pursue. But first Elias. The cell door groaned open. Elias looked up from his pallet, the wooden cross clutched like a talisman, scarred face etched deeper by sleepless hours. "They comin' for me, ain't they? Rope's hungry." "Not yet," Holmes said, showing the rag scrap. "Your wife's hands made this threat. Thorpe's game." Elias's haunted eyes widened, chains clinking as he rose. Sarah? She'd never. Unless he twisted her. God forgive me, I pushed her to hate. Lydia stepped forward, pressing a worn Bible into his hands. Read Psalm 34. The Lord is close to the broken-hearted. Hold to it. He traced the cross's grain, voice a ragged whisper. Broken. Aye. Tommy's death cracked me open. Gin filled the void, then rage at shadows. But murder, I'd not damn my soul so. Guards shouted from the corridor. Execution prep. Time's vein pulsing. Watson gripped Holmes's arm. We need Thorpe alive. Holmes nodded, resolve hardening. To the docks. Gregson, you're with us or against? Gregson exhaled, decision settling like sediment. With damn Thorpe's purse. As they raced through waking streets, horse-drawn carts rumbling, fishmongers calling, Elias's prayers echoed in Holmes's mind unbidden. For the first time, the detective felt the chill of something beyond deduction, a fragile hope flickering in the fog-shrouded dawn. But at the Thames's edge, a silhouette waited. Thorpe, valise in hand, boarding a steamer. And beside him a figure Holmes hadn't anticipated, Inspector Lestrade, Scotland Yard's old fox, pistol glinting. Betrayal's sting hit like cold steel. Gregson cursed. Lestrade's in Thorpe's pocket too? Holmes's mind raced ahead. No, red herring. Watch. The chase erupted, boots pounding wharves slick with fish guts and brine. Thorpe bolted, but Holmes anticipated, cutting him off at the gangplank. Governor, your secrets float no further. Thorpe whirled, portly frame heaving, scowl twisting into snarl. Hawthorne hangs regardless. Ripper or not, he ends Newgate's curse. Watson tackled a dockhand, lunging to aid, fists flying. Lydia stayed back, praying silently amid crates. Gregson cuffed Thorpe as constables swarmed. The rope sabotage. Your orders. Thorpe spat, to silence him. He saw too much, my. Indiscretions with the girls. Elias's innocence crystallized, but as Thorpe was dragged away, a scream pierced the air. Sarah, racing from a cab, face ashen. Tommy's cough. It weren't phthisis. Thorpe poisoned him, said Elias owed debts. Revelation rippled through them. Elias's fall wasn't vice alone, vengeance seeded. Holmes straightened. Rain from night before drying on his coat. Justice bends but doesn't break. Back in the cell, Elias gripped the Bible, tears carving paths down scarred cheeks. God. If you're there, break these chains. Chapel bells tolled the hour. The hanging scaffold loomed, rope swaying innocently. But whispers persisted. The rope remembers. And as Holmes pondered the final clue, a locket from Sarah's hand, engraved with Thorpe's initials, doubt gnawed. Was redemption for Elias or a deeper darkness uncoiling? Comment if you've known someone who found their way back. Holmes stood motionless in the dim corridor of Newgate Prison, the air thick with the stench of damp stone and unwashed despair. The locket burned in his palm, its engraved initials, H.T., a mocking signature from Governor Thorpe's downfall. Yet victory felt hollow, like a violin string snapped mid-cadenza. Elias Hawthorne's cell door creaked open under the warden's key, revealing the man slumped against the wall, Bible clutched like a shield against the encroaching shadows. Elias looked up, his scarred face etched deeper by the morning's revelations. His haunted eyes flickered with a mix of gratitude and terror. You got him, then? Thorpe's the devil I knew he'd become. Holmes nodded curtly, slipping the locket into his pocket. The governor confessed to sabotaging the rope and poisoning young Tommy. Your debts were his leverage, your silence his armor. But the hanging proceeds at dawn tomorrow. Scotland Yard insists on closure for the Ripper panic. Elias's laugh rasped like gravel under boots, bitter and broken. Closure? They branded me killer for whores in Whitechapel. Never mind, I pulled 'em from the streets, gave 'em shelter in my shop. Thorpe twisted it all, framed me to bury his own sins with those girls, and now God turns a blind eye? The detective paced the narrow cell, his sharp aquiline features taut in the lantern's glow. Faith is no ally in deduction, Hawthorne, but facts are. This locket held a miniature portrait, not of Thorpe's wife, but Sarah Blackwood's mother, Lydia's kin. Thorpe entangled your lives long before the noose. From the shadows beyond the bars, Dr. Watson cleared his throat, his military bearing softened by concern. Holmes, the chapel service starts soon. Reverend Michael's asked for you personally, perhaps. A moment's reflection. Holmes waved it off, but Elias leaned forward, voice gaining urgency. Go. Lydia's been there every night, praying for my soul like it's hers to save. Tell her Tommy's avenged, but my neck still stretches. And Holmes watched Gregson. That inspector's eyes darted too quick when Thorpe fell. Ambition festers in men like him. Outside, the prison yard baked under a rare shaft of autumn sun, piercing London's perpetual fog. Horse-drawn carts rumbled past the towering walls, their wheels grinding over cobblestones, slick with recent rain. Holmes and Watson crossed to the sanctuary chapel, a squat stone edifice huddled against Newgate's grim facade. Inside, the air hung heavy with incense and murmured psalms, wooden pews worn smooth by generations of the condemned seeking last-minute grace. Lydia Blackwood knelt at the altar, her widow's veil framing a face pale as alabaster, dark curls escaping like whispers of rebellion. She turned as they entered, eyes red-rimmed but fierce. Mr. Holmes, Sarah told me of the river chase. Thorpe's poison took my nephew, my sister's boy, but Elias. He shielded us from that monster for years. Holmes took a pew beside her, his deerstalker removed, revealing hair tousled by the wind. Your family ties to Thorpe run deep. The locket proves he courted your mother, then discarded her when scandal brewed. Elias discovered it, confronted him, hence the frame-up. Lydia's hands twisted a rosary, beads clicking softly. Elias was no saint, lost to gin and grief after his wife's fever death. But he found the Lord in that cellar shop, pulling souls from the abyss like he pulled me from the streets. Redemption's grip is tenuous, Mr. Holmes. Pray with us. The detective shifted uncomfortably, the chapel's stained glass casting crimson patterns across his gaunt frame. Prayer is irrational comfort for the fearful, madam, ideal in evidence. Reverend Michaels approached, a sturdy man in his 60s with a beard like weathered oak and eyes that pierced pretense. Nonsense, Mr. Holmes. Even your mind hungers for what lies beyond the scene. Elias clings to Psalm 34 tonight. The Lord redeems the soul of his servants. Join us. As the congregation, fellow prisoners shuffled in chains, guards standing uneasy, began to sing, Holmes felt an unfamiliar pull. The melody wove through him, stirring memories of his own isolation, nights in Baker Street chasing shadows while Watson slept soundly. Was there room in Deduction for the divine? But peace shattered as Inspector Elias Gregson burst through the doors, his rumpled suit damp from the drizzle outside, cynical gaze sweeping the room. Holmes! Word from the yard. Thorpe's spun a tale in custody. Claims Hawthorne's the true ripper. Rope failure his black magic. Lestrade's backing it, pushing for the hanging now, witnesses be damned. Watson's moustache bristled. Lestrade. That weasel was at the Thames with Thorpe. Gregson shrugged, lean frame tense. Politics, Doctor. Newgate's demolition looms. They want the curse ended clean. Meet me at the Temptation Tavern, old Whitechapel haunt. Elias's accomplices drink there. 1 hour. Holmes rose, mind whirring like a Babbage engine. Red herring or lead? Very well. But if Lestrade's soiled, heads roll. The chapel emptied, leaving Lydia to light a vigil candle, its flame dancing in her eyes. Be careful, Mr. Holmes. The tempter's voice is softest in the dark. Dusk cloaked the streets as Holmes and Watson navigated the labyrinth of Whitechapel, gas lamps sputtering to life amid the reek of gin distilleries and rotting fish from the nearby market. The Temptation Tavern squatted at a crooked corner, its sign swinging like a hanged man in the wind, faded paint depicting a buxom lass pouring ale, windows grimed with soot. Inside, the air assaulted with pipe smoke, stale beer, and the low growl of dock workers nursing grudges. Gregson waited at a scarred oak table in the back, nursing a pint, his world-weary face shadowed by a low beam. Sat down, Holmes. Barkeep remembers Elias boasting of kills here, nights before the murders. Holmes inhaled the fetid haze, observing 3 men at the bar, scars matching victim descriptions, eyes darting to newcomers. Watson, ale for cover. As tankards clinked, a burly fellow with a missing ear lumbered over, breath foul as the Thames. "You yard dog sniffing Hawthorne. Good riddance to the bastard. Sliced me wife once, laughing." "Lies," Holmes deduced silently, noting the man's clean hands, no butcher's calluses. Planted testimony. Gregson leaned in. "Proof enough. Hanging at midnight now. Emergency order." Watson gripped his glass. "Preposterous. We've Thorpe cold." But as Gregson smirked, a scuffle erupted at the door. Lydia shoved past a patron, Sarah trailing, faces flushed. "Elias's shop ledger. Hidden all these years. It lists Thorpe's payments to silence witnesses." She thrust a tattered book forward, pages yellowed and ink faded. Holmes scanned it, pulse quickening. Dates align. Thorpe bankrolled the frame, even the forged Ripper letters. Gregson snatched it, paling. "This changes nothing. Duty calls." He bolted, but Holmes anticipated, blocking the alley exit amid overflowing gutters and stray cats hissing. "Hand it over, Inspector. Your ambition ends here." Gregson whirled, fist raised, but Watson subdued him with a wrestler's hold from Afghan days. As constables arrived, summoned by Lydia's cry, the truth unraveled further. Gregson's pockets yielded Thorpe's bribe notes. Back at Newgate under moonless sky, Holmes confronted Elias through the bars once more. "The ledger clears you, hanging postponed." Elias sank to his knees, tears mingling with grime. "Thank God. And you, detective." But the darkness inside, Gin's ghost still whispers. Holmes watched him pray, the chapel bells tolling midnight elsewhere. Rationality prevailed, yet a seed of doubt sprouted. What if grace mended what logic could not? Dawn crept grey over the walls, but whispers grew. Lestrade fled the city, a new threat uncoiling from the prison's depths. A guard's scream echoed from the scaffold. The rope, twisted anew, bore a mark like claw scratches. Supernatural or sabotage? Holmes's resolve hardened, but his heart for the first time wavered toward the unknown. The fog clung to Newgate's ramparts like a shroud as Holmes paced the shadowed walkway, the guard's scream still reverberating in his ears. Dawn's feeble light filtered through the haze, illuminating the scaffold where the rope dangled, its hemp fibers grotesquely twisted into patterns no human hand could forge, deep gouges like the raking of talons, fresh and glistening with an unnatural dew. He knelt, magnifying glass in hand, inhaling the acrid tang of tar and something sharper, metallic, like blood not yet spilled. Watson approached from the governor's quarters, his face etched with fatigue, footsteps crunching on frost-kissed gravel. "Holmes, you've been here all night." Thorpe's in a fury, claims it's vandals, but the locks were intact. Holmes traced the scratches, his mind a whirlwind of deductions. "Vandals leave boot prints, Watson. This defies physics. The rope's tension should have snapped it clean during yesterday's test pull, yet it holds, unyielding." A low murmur rose from the prison yard below, inmates peering through barred slits, their whispers carrying on the chill wind. "Devil's work," one rasped. Hawthorne's packed with the shadows. Holmes straightened, pulse steady despite the chill seeping into his bones. "Superstition thrives in darkness," he murmured, but his voice lacked its usual conviction. The ledger had exposed Thorpe's corruption, Gregson's complicity, buying Elias a reprieve. Yet this rope mocked rationality, as if the prison itself rebelled against justice. Lydia Blackwood emerged from the mist-shrouded archway, her dark cloak billowing, Sarah Hawthorne close behind, clutching a worn prayer book. The widow's eyes, sharp as flint, fixed on the scaffold. Elias heard the scream from his cell. He says the rope weeps for the innocent hanged before him, souls trapped in these walls. Sarah nodded, her voice trembling yet fierce. "My brother's no saint, Mr. Holmes, but he's no killer. That mark, it's the same as on Dar's old locket, the one lost the night they framed him." Holmes accepted the locket she proffered, its silver chain tarnished, engraved with cryptic symbols mirroring the rope's scars. Origin unknown, but the patina suggests decades buried. He pocketed it, mind racing. Seeds of doubt from Elias's prayers the night before, fervent words to a god Holmes had long dismissed as myth, now germinated. What if logic's lattice cracked under unseen forces? Governor Thorpe barreled toward them, his jowls quivering, flanked by two burly warders. "Blackwood witchery," he bellowed, pointing at Lydia. "You've bewitched the rope to save your lover." Hanging proceeds at dusk. Emergency scaffold reinforcement ordered from the yard. Watson stepped forward, moustache bristling. "Lies again, Thorpe." "Your bribes litter Gregson's desk. Lestrade's vanished. Rumour has it he fled to Dover with your blood money." Thorpe's scowl deepened, sweat beading despite the cold. "Gregson's a fool. Lestrade's loyalty holds. The rope's sabotage proves Hawthorne's cult ties, Ripper rituals." Holmes's eyes narrowed, observing the governor's twitching left hand, calloused from clandestine grips. "You've handled this rope yourself, Thorpe. Those scratches match your signet ring's claw motif. Family crest, perhaps." The governor faltered, colour draining. "Preposterous. Secure the perimeter." As warders herded them back, Holmes slipped away toward the chapel, its spire piercing the fog like a skeletal finger. Inside, Elias knelt before the scarred wooden altar, candle flames dancing shadows across his scarred visage. The air smelled of wax and incense, heavy with centuries of whispered confessions. "You return, Detective," Elias said without turning, voice raw from disuse. "Gin no longer clouds me, but the visions persist, the hanged men's chorus pleading release." Holmes hesitated at the threshold, the door creaking shut behind him. "Visions are delirium, Hawthorne, yet this rope." "Explain the symbols." Elias rose slowly, eyes gleaming with a fervour Holmes found unnerving. "Not symbols, wards. My father etched them into that locket before Thorpe's men drowned him in the Thames, staging it as suicide. Newgate's foundations built on unmarked graves. The rope drinks their rage. Break it, and they rise." Rationality recoiled, yet Holmes felt a pull, an ache in his chest unfamiliar, curiosity laced with fear. "Your faith sustains you where evidence fails." "How?" Elias smiled faintly, tracing a cross on the damp stone floor. "Grace, Mr. Holmes, not earned but given, like the widow's light piercing your doubt." Outside chaos erupted, a warder's cry from the rope room. Holmes burst into the yard, finding the man slumped against crates, eyes wide in terror. "It moved, sir." The rope coiled like a serpent, hissing. Watson arrived, revolver drawn, scanning the empty scaffold. Hallucination from fatigue, surely. But Holmes examined the floor. Faint slime trail. Viscous and cold, leading to the prison's undercroft. Not slime, ectoplasm? No, phosphorescent residue. Chemical origin possible. Yet his hand trembled as he touched it, warm as fresh blood. Lydia joined them, Sarah pale beside her. The undercroft, sealed since the 1700s plague pit. Elias warned of it. Thorpe stormed up, red-faced. "Enough. Lock them all. Holmes, Watson, the women. Hanging at dusk. Witnesses be damned." As irons clanked on their wrists, Holmes's mind fractured between steel trap logic and encroaching shadow. Thorpe dragged him past the scaffold, where the rope swayed gently, impossibly, whispering in the wind, names of the forgotten dead. In the dim holding cell, Watson paced. Lydia sat composed. Sarah prayed softly. Holmes leaned against the bars, staring at the locket. Deductions piled. Thorpe's ring, Lestrade's flight, Gregson's fall, all threads to corruption. But the rope's defiance hinted at deeper rot, a moral abyss where Holmes's vaunted intellect faltered. "Tell me of grace," he said quietly to Elias, visible through the adjoining grate. "Does it unravel the impossible?" Elias's laugh was bittersweet. "It doesn't unravel, detective, it redeems. Faces the dark and calls light." Dusk fell swiftly, gas lamps sputtering to life along the walls, casting elongated spectres. Crowds gathered beyond the gates, curious gentry, jeering urchins, the press scribbling feverishly. Thorpe mounted the scaffold, proclamation in hand. "Elias Hawthorne, for the Ripper murders you hang." But as the procession began, Elias shuffling forward, noose poised, the rope slackened abruptly, coiling at his feet like a defeated snake. Gasps rippled through the throng. Thorpe yanked it taut. It resisted, fibers bulging unnaturally. Holmes strained against his bonds, shouting, The wards, Thorpe, you've awakened what you sealed." In the melee, Lydia slipped a hidden key into his lock, Sarah's sleight from her pickpocket days. Free. Holmes dashed forward, Watson covering with feigned struggle. Thorpe whirled, knife flashing toward the rope. No more delays. The blade sliced, the hemp parted, but reformed mid-air, writhing. Elias dropped to his knees, murmuring prayers. In that instant, Holmes glimpsed it, a flicker of luminescence along the scratches, as if the air itself breathed. Chaos reigned, crowds surging gates, warders fleeing. Amid the pandemonium, Lestrade emerged from the shadows, not fled but lurking, face ashen. Thorpe's master, a Masonic rite gone wrong, the pit's curse. Holmes seized Thorpe's collar. "Confess, or the rope claims you next." The governor crumpled, babbling of plague-era rituals to fortify the prison, blood oaths twisted into hauntings. But as truth spilled, a deeper rumble shook the foundations, undercroft stirring, voices rising in chorus. Holmes's heart pounded, logic yielding to terror's edge. Rationality's fortress cracked. Faith's whisper beckoned. Yet below, something ancient uncoiled, hungry for the living, and Elias's eyes met his, pleading not for escape but surrender to the divine unknown. Night deepened, the prison groaning like a beast awakened, promising revelations that would test every fibre of Holmes's soul. The prison's foundations trembled like the ribs of a dying giant, dust sifting from the vaulted ceilings in choking clouds. Holmes gripped Thorpe's collar tighter, his knuckles whitening as the governor's confessions poured out in a frantic torrent. "Plague times," he gasped, "when the Black Death clawed at London's gates. We swore blood oaths in the undercroft, Masonic rites twisted by desperation, sealing the walls with incantations from forgotten grimoires. Meant to ward off sickness, but it bound something darker, hungers that fed on the condemned." Watson steadied himself against a crumbling pillar, his physician's hands trembling not from fear, but from the dawning impossibility. "Holmes, this defies everything. The rope, the scratches, now this quaking." His voice cracked, loyalty warring with the evidence of his senses. Lestrade pushed through the milling warders, his face drained of colour, eyes darting to the shadowed stairwell leading below. "It's true, every word. I've heard the whispers from old yard files, executions failing, men walking after the drop. But Thorpe here, he revived it all for his final spectacle, thinking it would cement his legacy before demolition." Elias Hawthorne knelt amid the fray, chains rattling softly, his scarred face upturned as if listening to a distant choir. "The voices," he murmured, "they've called me since the noose slipped. Not demons, Mr. Holmes. Saints, perhaps, or the mercy you atheists deny." Holmes released Thorpe with a shove, the man slumping against the scaffold. Mercy? This is mass hysteria born of superstition. But even as he spoke, the rational scaffolding in his mind buckled. The air thickened, carrying a chill that seeped into his bones, laced with the metallic tang of ancient blood. He glanced at Lydia Blackwood, who had melted back into the throng, her dark veil framing eyes that held secrets sharper than any scalpel. She nodded toward the undercroft stairs, a silent imperative. "We go down," Holmes decided, pulse hammering against the cage of his rationality. Watson, Lestrade, cover the exits. Thorpe, lead or be dragged. The governor whimpered but complied, fumbling a lantern from a hook. Its flame sputtered yellow against the blackness as they descended slick stone steps, the air growing fetid, heavy with mould and something sweeter, like overripe fruit fermenting in the earth. Water dripped in rhythmic echoes, each plink amplifying the rumble that now pulsed like a heartbeat from below. Holmes's mind raced, cataloguing clues. The luminescent scratches on Elias's cell walls, the rope's unnatural resilience, Thorpe's guilt-ridden babble, plague rituals, masons invoking archangels for protection, but corrupted by fear into bargains with the abyss. Yet why now? Why Elias? A man convicted on circumstantial threads Holmes himself had once deemed flimsy. The stairs ended in a vast chamber, the undercroft of Newgate, a labyrinth of arched vaults where centuries of refuse had piled, broken manacles, gnawed bones, faded parchments curling like dead leaves. The lantern light caught runes etched into the keystone above, symbols Holmes recognized from obscure Kabbalistic texts, circles within circles pulsing faintly as if alive. Thorpe halted, pointing a shaking finger. There. The altar. We cut our palms, 9 of us governors chanting the words. To bind death itself to these walls, keep the plague at bay. But it demanded tribute. The hangings. They weren't justice. They were offerings. A low moan rose from the shadows, not human, but choral, layered voices weaving in Latin phrases Holmes translated on instinct. Domine libera nos a malo. Lord, deliver us from evil. His skin prickled. Logic recoiled. Hallucination, he told himself, amplified by suggestion and poor ventilation. Then the ground heaved, cracks spiderwebbing the floor. From a central pit shrouded in vapors, shapes emerged, not ghosts, but apparitions cloaked in tattered shrouds, faces gaunt with famine's hollow cheeks. Plague victims, their eyes milky voids, hands outstretched not in threat, but supplication. One drifted close, breath like grave soil, whispering, "Free us, detective." The rope refused because he is not the killer. The true fiend walks among the living. Holmes staggered back, deerstalker askew, the first fracture in his unassailable intellect. Watson fired his revolver blindly, shots echoing harmlessly. Lestrade crossed himself, muttering prayers from his Catholic youth. Thorpe collapsed, clawing at his chest as shadows coiled around him, dragging him toward the pit with inexorable slowness. No, please. The tributes were enough. Elias's voice echoed from above, faint but piercing. Faith, Holmes, not your deductions. Let go. In that maelstrom, Lydia appeared at the chamber's edge, her widow's weeds stark against the gloom. She extended a hand, palm scarred with an identical rune. I was one of the 9, she confessed softly. My husband, the first governor to try the rite. It took him, and now it claims the rest unless purified. Holy water, Holmes, from the chapel font. Only grace unbinds what oaths profane. Holmes's world tilted. Grace. The word tasted foreign, a surrender he had scorned in Baker Street debates with Watson's vicar friends. Yet here, amid the spectral pleas, his detachment frayed. He had solved murders by footprints and cigar ash, but this demanded something deeper, a leap beyond evidence. Watson grabbed his arm. Sherlock, we must retreat. Thorpe's gone. Screams fading into the pit. But Holmes hesitated, eyes locked on the apparitions. One form solidified, a woman with Lydia's features beckoning. Your mind blinds you, it seemed to say. See the truth. Redemption waits not in cells, but in release. A collapse shook the vault, ceiling stones tumbling. Lestrade hauled Holmes up the stairs, Watson shoving from behind. They burst into the courtyard as dawn's first pallor pierced the fog. The crowd dispersed, only echoes of panic lingering. Elias was gone, chains empty, vanished into the night's mercy or malice. Holmes slumped against the wall, breath ragged, the Undercroft's chill lingering in his veins. Rationality's emperor stood deposed, whispers of faith echoing where logic had reigned. But as the prison settled into uneasy quiet, a new shadow stirred, not below, but in the figure of Inspector Gregson approaching from the gates, eyes gleaming with ambition. He had watched it all, and now held leverage that could shatter Holmes forever. If this story has gripped you, hit the like button. It helps reach more people who would love this. Yet Gregson's smile promised not alliance, but betrayal's cold blade, drawing Holmes deeper into a web where even the divine might deceive. Inspector Tobias Gregson strode across the courtyard with the purposeful gait of a man who had just inherited a fortune in secrets. His rumpled suit hung looser in the morning light, as if the night's chaos had shaved pounds from his lean frame. Holmes straightened against the cold stone wall, his mind racing to reassemble the shards of rationality shattered in the Undercroft. Watson stood close, revolver still clutched in his pocket, eyes darting between the approaching detective and the empty chains dangling from the gallows like mocking vines. Gregson halted a few paces away, his cynical gaze sweeping over them like a searchlight. "Well, Mr. Holmes," he drawled, voice thick with East End grit, laced with the satisfaction of a predator cornered no longer. Quite the spectacle you've orchestrated. The governor vanished into thin air, the prisoner spirited away, and you lot stumbling out like ghosts from a penny dreadful. Scotland Yard will have questions, starting with why a consulting detective was meddling in an official execution. Holmes met his eyes, forcing calm into his voice despite the chill seeping from his bones. Inspector, the events below defy conventional explanation, but they demand investigation, not accusation. Thorpe's corruption runs deeper than embezzlement. Rites, oaths, something profane etched into this place. Gregson chuckled, low and miry, pulling a folded telegram from his coat. Profane, is it? Save your theatrics for the Strand magazine. I've got witnesses, guards who saw you prying into restricted vaults, Mrs. Blackwood whispering heresy in the shadows. And this. He thrust the paper forward. Arrived from Baker Street not an hour ago. Your brother Mycroft, urging discretion. Seems even the Diogenes Club knows you've overstepped. Holmes snatched the telegram, scanning the terse lines. Mycroft's warnings carried the weight of empire, but they confirmed the fracture. Official channels closing, his freedom to investigate curtailed. Watson leaned in, moustache twitching with concern. Tobias, we've been allies before. Elias Hawthorne is innocent. The rope, the apparitions, it's all connected to Newgate's history. Allies? Gregson spat the word like sour ale. You're a loose cannon, Watson, propping up this freak show. The Yard wants the Hawthorne case closed. Hanging Botched or not, he's a killer. And Thorpe, missing officials get quiet burials. But you, he jabbed a finger at Holmes, you poked the hornet's nest. Help me tie this up neat, or I'll drag you both in for obstruction. The courtyard felt smaller, the fog curling like fingers around their ankles, carrying the faint rot of the Thames. Holmes's mind whirred. Gregson's ambition was no secret, a ladder climber eyeing promotion through swift resolution. Yet beneath the bluster lurked fear, eyes flicking to the Undercroft grate as if expecting claws to emerge. Leverage, Holmes thought. He has it, but so do I. Very well, Inspector, a temporary accord. But we search Elias's cell first, evidence of his framing. Gregson hesitated, then nodded curtly. Fine, but I lead. They moved through the prison's dim corridors, gas lamps sputtering awake under the turnkey's reluctant hands. Newgate's bowels reeked of damp straw and unwashed despair, echoes of clanging doors a grim symphony. Elias's cell was a coffin of iron bars, scant possessions scattered, a threadbare blanket, a dog-eared Bible with pages marked by blood-stained thumbs, and scratched into the wall that cursed rune, glowing faintly in Holmes's heightened perception. Watson knelt, examining the scratches. Aramaic, perhaps? Lydia mentioned ancient oaths, governors binding their souls to the walls for power. Gregson snorted. Superstition. Hawthorne carved it to play mad. He rifled a small tin box, extracting a crumpled letter. Ah, here's your innocence. Love notes to a victim's sister, motive plain as gin. Holmes seized the letter, pulse quickening. Forged. Ink fresh, paper inconsistent with the victim's era. No, Gregson. This plants doubt, not proof. Tension crackled as Gregson whirled. Doubt? You're the one consorting with widows and phantoms. Thorpe confided in me. Blackwood's a hysteric. Husband driven mad by her occult dabbling. The name ignited Holmes's memory. Lydia's scarred palm, her plea for holy water. Grace unbinds, she'd said. His rational fortress trembled. Evidence pointed to conspiracy. Yet the Undercroft's visions lingered. Spectral faces pleading not for vengeance but release. A distant clamour interrupted. Shouts from the warden's office. They rushed there. Finding chaos, Lydia Blackwood, dress torn, confronting a cluster of guards. Her dark hair cascaded wild, eyes burning with urgency. He's taken it. The ledger. Elias's proof, hidden in the chapel. Gregson shoved forward. Blackwood, you're under suspicion. Trespassing. She ignored him, locking eyes with Holmes. The governor's book. Names, runes, the 9 who swore to eternal watch. Thorpe burned most, but Elias found the last pages. It names the true killer, Gregson. The inspector paled, hand twitching toward his whistle. Lies. The bitch is deranged. Holmes stepped between them, voice steel. Enough. Mrs. Blackwood, the chapel, now. They barreled through twisting halls to St. Sepulchre's adjoining chapel, Newgate's nominal sanctuary. Dim light filtered through stained glass depicting martyrdoms, casting bloody hues on pews worn smooth by condemned knees. The air smelled of incense and mildew, a faint echo of chants long faded. Lydia flung open the altar's hidden panel, revealing ash-strewn pages. But as Holmes reached for them, Gregson lunged, snatching a fragment. "No, you don't." A scuffle erupted. Watson's fist connected with Gregson's jaw, sending him sprawling into the font. Holy water splashed, and the air thickened, a low moan rising from the stones. The rune on the page ignited, projecting a haze, Governor Thorpe's younger visage, intoning an oath before 9 shadowed men, promising dominion over Newgate's souls in exchange for silence on its atrocities. Gregson scrambled up, face ashen. That was ritual, pagan rot. I had no part. But Holmes saw it, the scar on Gregson's palm, matching Lydia's. You were the 9th, Inspector, ambitious youth, buying favor with blood. Gregson backed toward the door, eyes wild. It was power, controlling the underclass, the cases unsolved. Hawthorne stumbled on it, so we framed him. The rope was meant to snap his neck clean. Watson's revolver emerged. "Stay where you are, too late." Gregson bolted, slamming the chapel door. Pursuit thundered into the streets, fog swallowing his form amid horse carts and vendors hawking pies. Holmes halted, chest heaving, the revelation bitter. Rationality had led here. Human greed, not ghosts, birthing the horror. Yet the moans persisted. Unbound by confession, Lydia touched Holmes's arm, her voice soft amid the din. "Confession frees men, Mr. Holmes, but souls demand grace. The right lingers. Elias holds the key, wherever he's fled." Watson holstered his weapon, face etched with worry. "Sherlock, Gregson's loose. He'll rally the yard against us." Holmes nodded, mind fracturing further. Baker Street offered sanctuary, but the case pulsed like a wound. As they slipped into the throng, a newsboy's cry pierced. "Extra! Newgate scandal, ghosts or graft?" Shadows lengthened, and in the alley's gloom, a figure watched. Elias Hawthorne, eyes gleaming with unearthly purpose, clutching the final ledger page. He mouthed words Holmes couldn't hear, but felt the true hanging awaits. The fog clung to Baker Street like a shroud, as Holmes pushed open the door to 217B, the familiar creak of hinges a hollow echo against the turmoil churning within him. Watson followed close, his footsteps heavy, revolver still warm in his pocket, while Lydia Blackwood glided in last, her widow's veil casting shadows over eyes that held secrets deeper than the Thames. "Mrs.?" Hudson's gas lamp flickered in the hall, casting elongated silhouettes that danced like accusing spectres on the wallpaper. The air inside smelled of pipe tobacco and stale tea, a sanctuary now tainted by the chapel's revelation. Gregson's scar, the blood oath, Hawthorne's framed innocence. Holmes collapsed into his armchair, fingers steepled, but his mind refused the violin or cocaine vial on the mantel. Rationality, his unyielding compass, had charted a course straight into moral abyss. Human greed, yes, Thorpe's graft, Gregson's ambition, but the moans from Newgate's stones. The rope that refused to snap Elias Hawthorne's neck during that final hanging. They mocked deduction, whispering of forces beyond Baker Street's gaslight logic. He glanced at Lydia, perched on the settee, her hands folded with unnatural calm. She saw potential in him, this widow who spoke of grace as if it were a tangible elixir, when all he felt was the fracture widening in his soul. Watson poured brandy, his military precision fraying at the edges. "Sherry, we must alert Lestrade. Gregson's confession ties the noose around Thorpe's neck. The yard will swarm Newgate by dawn." Holmes shook his head, voice low and edged with weariness. "No, John. Gregson flees not to confess, but to silence. That rune-etched page we glimpsed, it's the ledger's heart, binding 9 men to Newgate's underbelly. Hawthorne escaped with it, a ghost among the living, and now he hunts them. Us." Lydia leaned forward, her voice a soft current amid the tension. "Elias carries more than paper, Mr. Holmes. In that chapel you saw the oath, Souls pledged for power, but souls rebel, his eyes in the alley. They seek justice, not vengeance. Yet without grace, justice twists into something darker. Holmes's grey eyes pierced her, probing for artifice, but found only quiet conviction. Grace. A word for the faithful, not the fallen. Yet her presence stirred something dormant, a flicker of the boy from Yorkshire, before observation armoured him against sentiment. He rose abruptly, crossing to the cluttered desk where maps of London's fog-choked veins lay strewn. Newgate Prison loomed largest, its grim walls sketched with runes matching the chapel's fragment. The final hanging, announced with fanfare in '87 as the prison's swan song before demolition. Hawthorne, the Ripper copycat they called him, dropped through the trap with a crowd baying below. The rope stretched, held, impossible physics, or so the papers screamed. Supernatural intervention, the devout murmured. But now the truth clawed free. Ritual sabotage to protect the syndicate. A knock rattled the door, sharp, insistent. Watson's hand flew to his revolver as Holmes motioned silence. Mrs. Hudson's voice quavered from below. "Mr. Holmes?" A lad with a telegram, urgent from the yard. Holmes descended the stairs, snatching the envelope. The messenger, a urchin with soot-streaked cheeks, vanished into the mist before questions could form. Inside, Gregson's scrawl. Baker Street, midnight. Come alone, or Hawthorne's ledger burns, and your reputation's with it. Watson's face hardened. A trap, Sherry. He's cornered, desperate. Lydia touched Holmes's sleeve, her fingers cool as marble. Or a chance for redemption, Inspector. Men like him cling to old oaths until shown a newer path. Holmes crumpled the note, resolve hardening like tempered steel. Rationality demanded caution, but the case's pulse urged pursuit. The carriage wheels clattered over cobblestones an hour later, depositing him at the deserted Thames embankment, where gas lamps sputtered against encroaching dark. The river lapped hungrily, carrying whispers of drowned secrets, coal barges groaning in the distance. Gregson emerged from shadows near Cleopatra's Needle, his rumpled suit dishevelled, palm scar glistening under moonlight. "You came, Holmes." "Wise." Holmes's voice cut crisp. "Speak plainly, Inspector. The ninth man. Your ambition bought silence on Newgate's atrocities, starved prisoners, falsified hangings for profit. Hawthorne witnessed, so you hanged him alive." Gregson laughed, bitter and ragged, breath fogging the chill air. Alive? The rope was to claim him clean, but it rebelled, cursed by the right we invoked. Thorpe led us, promising control over the prison souls, the unsolved vanishings, power in London's veins. But Hawthorne, he knew the old chants from his East End witch mother. He twisted it back on us. Holmes stepped closer, senses attuned to every twitch, the revolver bulge in Gregson's coat, the tremor in his cynical gaze. And Lydia. Her scar matches yours. Gregson's eyes narrowed, a flicker of something raw. Regret. Lust? She was the right's temptress, drawing us in. But she's no widow. Blackwood was her coven name. She sees your potential, Holmes, because you're like us, detached, hungry for more than fleshly limits. The words landed like a blow, stirring Holmes's inner storm. Detached. He had chronicled crimes without flinching, Watson his emotional tether. Yet here, amid the river's murmur, doubt seeped in. What if the supernatural was no delusion, but a fracture in reason's facade? A shadow shifted upstream, footsteps on wet stone. Gregson whirled, drawing his weapon. Too late. Elias Hawthorne lunged from the gloom, wild black hair, matted, scarred face twisted in fury. The ledger page clutched like a talisman. "You framed me for your blood games. My neck still aches from that infernal rope." Gunshots cracked the night, bullets splintering the embankment. Holmes dove behind a crate, heart pounding as rational thought warred with primal fear. Gregson fired wildly, silhouette etched against the Needle's obelisk. Hawthorne vanished into fog, but not before hurling a stone that cracked Gregson's temple, sending him crumpling. Holmes approached cautiously, binding Gregson's wound with his scarf. "Why summon me?" Gregson coughed, blood flecking his lips. "To warn you, the right awakens fully at Newgate's demolition dawn. 2 days hence. 9 must die to seal it, or the souls rise. You're not one of us. Yet, break it, Holmes. For once, faith over fact. Sirens wailed distant, yard reinforcements closing in. Holmes slipped away, mind reeling, the ledger's absence a void. Back at Baker Street, Watson waited, Lydia's absence noted, gone to her own shadows. He recounted the clash, voice steady but eyes betraying the inner quake. John Gregson implicated her. Coven, but his plea. Redemption through breaking the right. Watson gripped his shoulder, loyalty fierce. Then we end it at Newgate, but Sherry, this gnaws at you. Logic bending to Grace? Holmes stared into the fire, flames mirroring his turmoil. Perhaps, old friend, rationality exposed the crime, but only something deeper mends the soul. Dawn crept grey over London, newsboys already shrilling of embankment shootout, Holmes named, scandal brewing. A note slipped under the door, Lydia's hand. Meet at the sanctuary of St. Agnes. Truth awaits. But as Holmes pocketed it, a low moan echoed from the hearth, like Newgate stones crying out. Hawthorne was near, the true hanging looming, and within Holmes the transformation stirred, Grace's whisper challenging reason's throne. What price for order now? Holmes slipped through the morning fog veiling Baker Street, the note from Lydia burning in his pocket like a half-solved cipher. The air hung heavy with coal dust and the distant clang of church bells, urging him toward the sanctuary of St. Agnes, a forgotten chapel huddled in Whitechapel's shadowed alleys. His mind raced, piecing fragments, Hawthorne's impossible survival, Gregson's bloodied warning of the right, the ledger's vanished proofs. Rationality demanded Lydia as coven temptress, yet her words echoed with a plea that tugged at something uncharted within him, a flicker of doubt in pure deduction. The sanctuary's weathered oak doors creaked open under his push, releasing a rush of incense and candle wax, sharp against the street's rot. Inside, vaulted stone arches loomed like silent judges, stained glass filtering blood-red light onto scarred pews. Lydia waited at the altar, her raven hair unbound, widow's weeds traded for a simple grey shawl that clung to her slender frame. Her emerald eyes, usually veiled in mystery, now brimmed with raw vulnerability, hands clasped as if in prayer. Sherlock, you've come. I feared the shadows would claim you first. He approached, boots echoing softly on the flagstones, his hawk-like gaze scanning for traps, hidden passages, accomplices in the confessionals. No such signs. Only the weight of her gaze pulling him closer. The right awakens at Dawn's demolition. 9 souls bound Newgate's curse in 1666, plague year. The rope that spared Elias was the first fracture. Governor Thorpe leads the coven now, desperate to complete it. Gregson. He faltered, tried to confess to you. Holmes's pulse quickened, the chapel's chill seeping through his ulster. Thorpe, the portly bureaucrat with his ledger of bribes. The pieces aligned cruelly. Newgate's final hanging as sacrificial capstan, Hawthorne's frame-up to plug the 9th slot. But why summon me here? If not to ensnare. She stepped forward, her fingers brushing his sleeve, a touch electric with unintended intimacy. Because I see you, Sherlock. Not the machine of logic, but the man starving for more. Thorpe corrupted me once, after my husband's death. Promised protection for secrets. I helped bind the ledger's truths, but Elias, his innocence haunts me. Grace offered him survival. Now it calls you. Grace. The word hung between them, alien to his lexicon, yet it stirred the quake Gregson had ignited. Holmes paced the nave, mind whirling through deductions, the moans echo from his hearth, Hawthorne's vengeful silhouette. Faith over fact. Absurd. Yet the chapel's hush amplified his inner rift, reason fracturing under the weight of souls unbound. Lydia, if this rite is mere superstition, it's older than stone. The plague warden's pact, 9 innocents hanged to trap the dead below. The rope rebelled on Elias because one coven member prayed true, my husband, unbeknownst to me. Now Thorpe hunts us all to silence the break. A low rumble shook the rafters, dust sifting from above like spectral ash. Holmes froze, hand instinctively to his revolver, From the vestry shadows emerged Governor Harlan Thorpe, his corpulent form squeezed into the archway, pistol levelled, face slick with sweat under gaslight flicker. Behind him, two bruisers from Newgate's undercroft, their knuckles scarred from years of disciplining the damned. Well played, widow, luring the meddler to confession. Lydia recoiled, colour draining from her cheeks. Harlan, no. The boy's soul. Thorpe's laugh barked hollow, eyes darting like a cornered rat. Souls? Power, Lydia. Newgate crumbles, but the pact endures. Holmes dies here, the ninth seal. Scotland Yard closes eyes for gold. Holmes calculated trajectories, the chapel's confines a vice. He lunged sideways as Thorpe fired, the shot splintering a confessional acrid powder stinging the air. Lydia screamed, diving behind the altar as one brute charged. Holmes sidestepped, delivering a precise jab to the man's throat, cartilage crunching. The second swung a cudgel. Holmes parried with his cane, wood cracking against stone. Thorpe circled, gun wavering. You unravel nothing, detective. Elias rots framed because he saw the ledger. Plague gold funneled to us. The hanging, theatre to bind him eternal. The revelation landed like a blow, Holmes's mind reeling. Not supernatural fully, but laced with greed's darkness, yet the rope's defiance. Lydia's whispered prayer through her husband's proxy. Thorpe fired again, grazing Holmes's arm, fire blooming hot. He tackled the governor, revolver skittering across flagstones. They grappled, Thorpe's bulk pinning him momentarily, breath foul with whiskey and fear. Grace won't save you, Thorpe snarled, fingers clawing for his throat. From the altar, Lydia rose, crucifix in hand, not as weapon but talisman. Harlan, enough. Mercy or madness. The brute Holmes downed stirred, grabbing her ankle. She stumbled, the crucifix clattering. Holmes surged up, knee driving into Thorpe's gut, wind exploding from him. He retrieved the pistol, pressing it to the governor's temple as sirens wailed distant. Watson's reinforcements, perhaps, tipped by a street Arab. Bind them, Lydia. The yard comes. She nodded, tearing vestments for ropes, her hands trembling but resolute. As Thorpe spat curses, Holmes rifled his pockets. A corner of the ledger, singed, detailing the 9 names. Elias among innocents. Others vanished debtors. Proof at last. But as Gregson burst in minutes later, bandaged temple fresh, towing Watson, the chapel fell silent, save for Thorpe's laboured breaths. Holmes stood amid the wreckage, arm seeping blood, logic triumphant yet hollow. Lydia met his eyes, a silent question. Does reason suffice? Watson clapped his shoulder, concern etching his moustache. Good Lord, Holmes, alive. Gregson cuffed Thorpe, gaze humbled. The right. It ends? Holmes pocketed the fragment, turmoil churning. Demolition dawn nears. Hawthorne roams free, souls or not, vengeance brews. Outside, fog thickened, horse hooves clattering as they loaded the prisoners. Lydia lingered, her transformation mirroring his own budding shift, from conspirator to confessor. Sherlock, the whisper of grace. It mends what logic shatters. He turned away, but her words lingered, challenging the fortress of his mind. Baker Street called, but so did Newgate's shadow. Who pulled the strings deepest? Thorpe confessed much, yet Hawthorne's fury hinted more. Comment who you suspect, listener. Can you solve it first? Night deepened, and from the Thames's murk rose a figure. Elias Hawthorne, ledger page in hand, eyes burning with otherworldly fire. The true hanging approached, not of rope but reckoning. Holmes felt it, the pull toward faith's uncharted waters, where redemption demanded surrender. What if grace was the final deduction? As he hailed a hansom, a child's cry pierced the gloom, not street urchin but echo from Newgate's cells. The right stirred fully, and within Holmes the battle raged. Intellect against the divine unknown. Dawn loomed, 2 tests colliding, Thorpe's trial and Hawthorne's strike. Survival hinged on embracing the irrational, or all would hang in shadows eternal. The hansom cab rattled through the fog-choked streets of Whitechapel, its wheels splashing through puddles that mirrored the gas lamp's sickly yellow glow. Sherlock Holmes leaned back against the worn leather seat, the chill seeping through his ulster coat like an accusation. His arm throbbed where Thorpe's blade had grazed it, a dull pulse syncing with the clip-clop of hooves on cobblestone. Baker Street beckoned as a sanctuary of pipe tobacco and chemical experiments, yet his mind refused respite, tangled in the ledger fragment's implications, 9 names, 9 souls twisted by Newgate's greed. Elias Hawthorne's shadow loomed largest, not as victim, but avenger, his eyes in the chapel haunting Holmes like a deduction unfinished. Watson sat opposite, his moustache twitching with unspoken worry, the fresh bandage on Gregson's temple a reminder of the chapel's violence. Lydia Blackwood had vanished into the night, her parting whisper, "Grace mends what logic shatters," echoing in Holmes's ears. He had dismissed it then as sentimentality, but now, with the Thames's briny reek wafting through the cab's cracks, doubt gnawed. What if the rope's refusal was no hallucination, no trick of mist and mania? The child's cry from Newgate lingered, not some urchin's wail, but a spectral summons, pulling him toward truths reason alone could not map. They arrived at 221B as the first grey light pierced the smog, Mrs. Hudson's parlour aglow with hearth fire. She bustled in with tea and bandages, her plump face creased in maternal fussing. "Mr. Holmes, you're bleeding through that sleeve. Sit before you keel over like one of your experiments." Watson took charge, unwinding the makeshift dressing, his surgeon's hands steady despite the night's toll. Holmes submitted silently, his grey eyes fixed on the violin case by the window, its strings a promise of melody to soothe the chaos within. As Watson stitched, Gregson paced the Persian rug, his rumpled suit more dishevelled than usual. Thorpe's in irons at the yard, spitting names like Hawthorne's accomplices, but the man's raving about curses now. Says the hanging right demands blood to seal the ledger's debts. "Holmes, you've got the scrap. Does it name the others?" Holmes flexed his mended arm, the sting sharpening his focus. 9 souls, Gregson, condemned not for crimes but convenience, debtors, vagrants, silenced witnesses. Hawthorne was to be the 10th, his neck the final knot in Thorpe's web. But the rope. It held as if heaven intervened. Gregson snorted, rubbing his bandaged head. Heaven? Bollocks. Mass hysteria from the fog and that widow's potions. Lydia Blackwood, her husband's ledger, ties her to Thorpe's bribes. She's no saint. Holmes's pipe found his lips, the tobacco's acrid smoke curling like Newgate's mist. Blackwood was a pawnbroker, ruined by Thorpe's loans, his suicide pinned on despair. Lydia sought justice, not vengeance, yet her eyes held secrets, a flicker of the divine madness Hawthorne claimed. Watson cleared his throat, setting aside scissors. "Justice or not, Holmes, you've pushed too far this time. Thorpe's trial at dawn, Old Bailey's packed. If Hawthorne strikes amid the crowd..." The words hung, a vice tightening. Holmes rose, striding to the mantel where chemical vials gleamed. He needed data, not dread. Maps of Newgate unrolled across the table, pins marking cells, trapdoors, the chapel's hidden alcove. The child's cry, traced to the condemned wing, empty since demolition orders. No urchins there, yet the echo persisted. His mind raced. Acoustic anomaly. Or prelude to Hawthorne's ritual. Grace, Lydia had said, effort wed to mercy. For the first time, Holmes felt the stirrings of personal wreckage, not cases unsolved, but his own isolation, the cocaine vials whispering temptation in the drawer. A knock shattered the hush. Urgent, muffled. Mrs. Hudson ushered in a trembling figure. Mary Hawthorne, Elias's sister, mid-30s, her shawl threadbare, face gaunt with coal dust from the factories, her eyes mirrors of Elias's haunted gaze fixed on Holmes. "You freed him," they say, "but he's not the brother I knew. He came to our rooms last night, raving of ropes that bind the living to the dead. Spoke of you, Mr. Holmes, as the key or the sacrifice." She thrust a crumpled note into his hand. Inked in haste, it read, "The 10th snap ends at dawn. Join or hang eternal." E.H. Watson's hand gripped the table. Good God, a threat. Gregson drew his revolver. "We'll barricade Baker Street. Call in Lestrade." But Holmes waved them off, the note's weight heavier than lead. "No, this demands confrontation, not fortification." Elias seeks not my death, but revelation, the ledger's full truth, buried in Newgate's vaults. Thorpe confessed partial. Hawthorne holds the rest. Dawn trial coincides with demolition's first blast. Chaos perfect for reckoning. Mary's voice cracked, hands ringing. He was innocent once, a printer's apprentice, framed for those murders in '85. Thorpe planted evidence, silenced him with the noose. But the fall changed him, voices in the dark promising release if he claimed the 9. "Forgive me, sir," I doubted him. Turned away. Now with Grace's whisper in church corners, I see my failure. Help him, as no one helped me. Her words pierced Holmes's fortress, echoing Lydia's. Family wreckage, forgiveness's forge. He saw his own arc mirrored, detachment crumbling to empathy. Watson nodded, eyes kind. "We'll go together, Holmes, logic and loyalty." Gregson grumbled assent, holstering his gun. "Fine. But if it's sorcery, I'm shooting first." As they prepared, Holmes paused at the window, fog parting to reveal St. Paul's dome, ethereal in pre-dawn haze. Faith's uncharted waters beckoned, grace not irrational, but the equation's missing variable. He pocketed a vial, not cocaine, but morphine for Mary's nerves, a small amends. The cab waited below, hooves stamping impatience. Old Bailey loomed as they arrived, its stone facade grim under scaffolding, crowds swelling like a tide. Thorpe shuffled in chains, face ashen, muttering of rights unbroken. Holmes slipped through the throng, Watson and Gregson flanking, Mary trailing with whispered prayers. Inside, the dock reeked of polished wood and fear sweat, Judge's gavel echoing like a heartbeat. But as Thorpe's trial commenced, a shadow detached from the gallery. Elias Hawthorne, wild-haired, ledger full in hand, eyes locking on Holmes. "Not vengeance," he mouthed silently, "redemption." The air thickened, whispers rising. Had the rope's miracle spread? Holmes's pulse quickened. The child's cry echoed anew from the rafters. Thorpe's testimony faltered, naming accomplices, but Hawthorne rose, voice booming unnaturally. The rope refused because Grace intervened. 9 souls cry for amends. The court gasped, guards lunging, but Holmes stepped forward, hand raised. "Wait, let him speak. Truth demands it." Chaos erupted, shouts, scuffles. Yet in that maelstrom Holmes glimpsed Lydia in the wings, her nod affirming. The ledger unfurled, pages detailing bribes, forgeries, lives crushed. Mary's sob cut through, forgiveness offered mid-madness. Elias's fury softened, tears carving tracks in grime. But as demolition blasts shook the foundations, Newgate's death knell, a deeper rumble stirred. Not dynamite, but something primal, the right's climax uncoiling. Hawthorne seized Holmes's arm. The 10th test, surrender your reason or all unravel. Watson pulled Mary back, Gregson firing warning shots skyward. Holmes hesitated, intellect warring with the pull. Grace's deduction, effort alone, snaps the rope. He nodded, whispering, "Lead on." Into Newgate's crumbling heart they plunged, vaults yawning like graves, the true hanging spectres gathering. What horrors awaited in the depths where logic met the divine? Holmes's transformation teetered, one choice from restoration or eternal shadow. Dust choked the air as they descended the spiral stairs into Newgate's bowels, the stone steps slick with centuries of damp and forgotten blood. Torchlight flickered from Gregson's lantern, casting elongated shadows that danced like accusing fingers along the vaulted walls. Holmes led, his deerstalker pushed back, sweat beading on his sharp brow despite the chill that seeped into bones. Behind him, Elias Hawthorne gripped the ledger like a shield, his scarred face twisted in fervent determination, wild black hair matted against his skull. Watson steadied Mary with one arm, her breaths coming in shallow gasps, while Gregson brought up the rear, revolver drawn, his cynical eyes darting to every crevice. The air grew thicker, laced with the metallic tang of rust and decay, as if the prison itself exhaled its last grudging breath before demolition. Echoes of distant hammers above reverberated like muffled thunder, reminding them the world above pressed on, oblivious. Holmes's mind raced, cataloguing anomalies, the unnatural warmth rising from below, the faint hum that set his teeth on edge, the way the shadows seemed to linger, reluctant to retreat with the light. Elias halted at a rusted grate, his voice a gravelly whisper that cut through the gloom. "This is the heart, where the 9 hanged before the rope learned mercy." He wrenched the bars aside with surprising strength, muscles honed by years in chains. They spilled into a cavernous chamber, its floor littered with shattered manacles and gnawed bones. Rats' feasts or worse. In the center loomed a makeshift gallows, rope dangling limp from a blackened beam, swaying gently though no breeze stirred. Holmes circled it, fingers tracing the noose's frayed fibers, his grey eyes narrowing. Fibers intact, no cuts, weight distribution even, yet it held. Physics defies, but not without cause. Elias thrust the ledger forward. "Cos, read their names, detective. 9 souls Thorpe condemned unjustly, beggars, thieves framed for his graft. Their cries bound the right. Grace snapped the 10th. Mary clutched Watson's sleeve, her kind eyes wide with terror and awe. "John, it's true. The boy I saw in my dream, little Tommy Wren, first of the 9. He whispered of unfinished songs." Watson squeezed her hand, his military bearing cracking, moustache twitching. "Holmes, this borders madness, but the evidence mounts." A low moan rippled through the chamber then, not wind but voices, layered, pleading, rising from cracks in the floor like steam from hell's kettles. Faces materialized in the torchlight haze, translucent figures, necks elongated, eyes hollow with betrayal. One, a gaunt child no older than 10, extended a bony hand toward Holmes. "You see reason, sir, but not the heart that beats beneath." Holmes recoiled, intellect fracturing under the onslaught, hallucination induced by gas pockets, suggestion from Hawthorne's zeal. Yet the child's touch chilled his palm, real as the fog of Baker Street. Memories flooded unbidden, his own fallow youth, Brother Mycroft's shadow, the cocaine haze that once dulled sharper pains. Rock-bottom glimpsed not in vice, but isolation, reason's thrown a solitary cell. Thorpe, dragged in last by Gregson, spat defiance from his chains, portly frame quaking. Lies. Spectral tricks by this madman Hawthorne. I swung true for order, but the spectres swirled, ledger pages flipping of their own accord, revealing Thorpe's scrawled bribes, falsified ledgers tying him to vanished witnesses. Gregson paled, revolver lowering. "Governor." "You profited from their nooses." Lydia Blackwood emerged from a side archway, her widow's veil casting her face in ethereal glow, dark hair framing compassionate eyes. She had followed unseen, her presence a quiet anchor. "Harlan, your ambition choked the innocent. Grace offers amends now before the beams fall." Thorpe lunged, chains rattling, face purpling. "Witch, all of you, I'll bury this." But Elias intercepted, ledger slamming against Thorpe's chest like judgment. "No more burying, Harlan." The rope refused for them, and for me the 10th who sought vengeance over truth. The moans crescendoed, the gallows beam groaning as if alive. Cracks spiderwebbed the ceiling, dust sifting like ash from a pyre. Holmes felt the vice tighten. "Surrender reason," Elias had said. His mind screamed deductions, acoustics amplifying echoes, phosphorescent fungi birthing apparitions. But his heart, long silenced, stirred. What if grace was no myth, but mechanism unseen? "Effort alone snaps the rope," Hawthorne urged earlier. Watson stepped forward, voice steady despite fear. "Holmes, we've chased shadows together. This demands more than pipe and lens. For Mary, for the boy, trust beyond logic." Holmes met the child's gaze, saw not fear, but longing. Tommy Wren, Ledger named him, orphaned by Thorpe's scheme, hanged for pinching bread. The detective's voice emerged hoarse, stripped bare. "Very well. Grace, if you exist, reveal your deduction." Silence fell, profound, broken only by dripping water. Then light pierced the gloom, not lantern, but golden shafts from fissures above, illuminating each spectre. They solidified, not vengeful, but serene, hands clasping in forgiveness. Thorpe crumpled, sobbing confessions into the dirt. The bribes, the frames. "I sold souls for a knighthood. Forgive." Elias knelt beside him, ledger closing. "Grace intervened, brother. Amends start here." Thorpe nodded, Broken, as Gregson uncuffed one hand, tentative alliance forged in the depths. Mary sang then, soft hymn from her prayers, voice weaving through the light. The spectres faded, smiles lingering, the rope dissolving to dust. Newgate shuddered, but held a reprieve. Holmes exhaled, transformation etching deeper. Reason yields but does not break. Yet as they ascended, a final spectre lingered in the shadows, his own reflection in a puddle, eyes no longer detached, but alive with possibility. Lydia touched his arm. The final test nears, Sherlock. Restoration waits above, but temptation stirs in the crowds. Watson clapped his shoulder. Whatever comes, old friend, we're in it. Gregson holstered his gun, humbled. Never thought I'd see Scotland Yard bow to ghosts. But outside, as demolition blasts neared, a figure watched from the fog-shrouded alley, slick-haired accomplice, Ledger's last name unchecked. Vengeance uncoiled anew, targeting the healed. Holmes tensed, the right incomplete. One soul resists Grace's pull. Into the fray they stepped. Vaults light their fragile torch. The streets awaited, thronged with the curious whispers of the failed hanging morphing to miracle. Holmes scanned faces, pulse steady now with newfound rhythm. Redemption's path twisted onward, family bonds, Watson's, his own surrogate, straining under the weight. Mary linked arms with Lydia, two women of quiet strength bridging worlds. Elias, Ledger, tucked away, walked taller, fellow traveller to the detective once skeptical. Thorpe, under guard yet unbowed by shame, murmured thanks to the divine intervention that spared his neck. Yet in Holmes's pocket, a crumpled note from the child's touch burned. Beware the betrayer in plain sight. Reason and grace allied, but trust fractured. As gas lamps hissed alive in the perpetual dusk, horse hooves clattered past, the crowd parting for their emergence. Questions bombarded. What sorcery? Divine wrath? Holmes silenced them with a raised hand, voice carrying authority laced with humility. Truth emerges not in spectacle, but surrender. Newgate's final hanging teaches. No soul beyond the rope's mercy. Cheers mixed with jeers, but deeper, a hush of awe. Watson beamed pride. Gregson nodded respect. Lydia's eyes promised more revelations. But the accomplice slunk closer, knife glinting under cloak, eyes fixed on Elias, the true target. Holmes whirled, pipe forgotten, Grace's intuition sparking. The clash ignited, fog swirling as redemption met resistance one last time. What blade would pierce the veil of restoration? The fog thickened like a living shroud as Holmes lunged forward, his lean frame cutting through the chill air of the alleyway just beyond Newgate's crumbling walls. The accomplice, a wiry shadow named Silas Crowe, Ledger's final unchecked name, eyes burning with the madness of the Forsaken, raised his blade, its edge catching the feeble glow of a distant gas lamp. Elias Hawthorne staggered back, the weight of his recent salvation making his movements heavy, unpracticed in violence after years chained in darkness. Holmes's voice sliced the mist first, calm, yet edged with the steel of deduction, fused with something newer, something born in the vault's dim light. Stand down, Crow. Your master's web unravels. Thorpe's confessions seal your fate. Silas snarled, lips curling over yellowed teeth, his coat flapping like ragged wings. Lies from a dead man's mouth. Elias dies tonight, and the miracle crumbles. The crowd beyond the alley murmured, drawn by the scuffle's echoes, but Watson pushed through first, his military instincts flaring. He grabbed Silas's wrist mid-thrust, twisting with a surgeon's precision born of Afghan battlefields. The knife clattered to the cobblestones, spinning in a puddle that reflected the prison's silhouette like a fractured mirror. Gregson burst in behind, revolver drawn but steady now, no longer the ambitious climber, but a man humbled by forces beyond Scotland Yard's grasp. On your knees, you cur, the game's over. Silas twisted free, feral and desperate, his scarred knuckles raking Watson's cheek before Holmes delivered a precise blow to the solar plexus. The man crumpled, gasping, the fight draining from him like blood from a fresh wound. Yet in his eyes lingered not defeat, but a venomous certainty. You think Grace saved him? The rope knew truth. Elias is the killer, not me. The child lied. Elias, breathing ragged, knelt slowly. Not in fear, but exhaustion. The ledger clutched to his chest like a shield. No more shadows, Silas. I was the blade once, lost in drink and rage after the fire took my family. But the vaults, they showed me the light I snuffed out. The words hung heavy, pulling the group into a circle amid the fog's embrace. Lydia Blackwood stepped forward, her widow's veil framing a face etched with quiet resolve, hands steady as she pressed a handkerchief to Watson's cut. Her voice, soft with the cadence of old hymns, carried through the damp air. We've all wielded blades, Elias. Mine widowed me to secrets like yours, but surrender mends what fury breaks. Mary Watson arrived then, slipping from the throng with a lantern's warm flicker, her practical skirts muddied, but eyes alight with the fierce loyalty that had anchored her husband through wars and wonders. "John," she whispered, touching his arm, then turning to Elias with no judgment, only the steady gaze of one who knew grief's forge. "You've walked from Newgate a new man, let that be enough." Holmes paced the alley's edge, pipe unlit between his fingers, mind racing through the threads now weaving beyond reason. The child's note, beware the betrayer in plain sight, not Crow, not Thorpe. Silas's ravings planted the seed, Elias's past crimes, confessed yet unproven, but the hanging's failure, the vault's glow. Divine logic unassailable. Watson wiped blood from his lip, clapping Elias on the back with rough affection. "We've seen stranger truths." Holmes. "The rope refused because mercy demanded it. Crow's just the echo." Gregson hauled Silas up, cuffs biting into wrists, his cynical drawl softened. "Take him to the yard. But mark me, Holmes, this changes everything. Scotland Yard owes you." And whatever angel pulled those strings. As the inspector dragged the sputtering man away, the crowd swelled, whispers turning to a hush of reverence. Newgate's demolition blasts rumbled faintly in the distance, shaking loose mortar from the prison's teeth-like battlements. Holmes felt the vibration in his bones, a reminder that even stone yielded to time and grace. They moved toward the sanctuary of Lydia's nearby home, a modest terraced house on Fleet Street, its windows aglow with candlelight piercing the perpetual dusk. Inside, the air smelled of fresh bread and chamomile tea, a stark balm against the street's coal reek. Governor Harlan Thorpe sat chained to a chair by the hearth, his portly frame shrunken, scowl replaced by hollow eyes reflecting the fire's dance. "You saved my neck, Hawthorne," Thorpe muttered as Elias entered, ledger placed on the scarred oak table. "I twisted the noose for my own gain. Falsified ledgers, bribes from the Ripper's shadows. Thought it'd bury the truth forever." Elias nodded, no triumph in his haunted gaze, only the raw ache of mirrored wreckage. "And I let the bottle twist mine. Killed in blind fury after losing Sarah and the boy to that tenement blaze. But confession cleanses Harlan, even for us." Lydia poured tea, her movements graceful, revealing fragments of her arc, from enigmatic widow to bridge between worlds. "My husband died covering your crimes, Thorpe, knowing the underbelly's cost. Tonight, we forgive what the law can't." Holmes observed from the shadows, the room's warmth thawing his detachment. Inner turmoil stirred. Reason had always been his sanctuary, yet here, amid these flawed souls, transformation beckoned. Watson caught his eye, moustache twitching in a knowing smile. Not everything deduces, old chap. Some truths whisper. Mary linked hands with Lydia, their quiet strength a testament to bonds reforged. As the clock chimed 10, tolling like a prayer, Thorpe bowed his head. "Pray for me, all of you. The rope's mercy extends." But outside, as rain began to patter on the panes, Holmes's pocket stirred again. The child's note, reread by lamplight, "Beware the betrayer in plain sight." Crow's arrest felt too neat, a red herring in Grace's grand design. Elias's confession rang true, yet a final thread dangled. Who had truly ignited the tenement fire that birthed his rage? Watson leaned close, voice low. "Rest now. Tomorrow we mend the rest." Holmes nodded. But his piercing grey eyes scanned the room, landing on a face whose loyalty masked deeper shadows. The betrayer watched, smile serene, as Redemption's fragile torch flickered. In the streets beyond, demolition crews hammered closer, Newgate groaning its last. But within, alliances solidified, family, blood, and chosen, healing fractures long ignored. Yet the note's warning coiled tighter. One soul resisted, blade hidden not in cloak but heart. Elias retired to a cot by the fire, sleep claiming him for the first time without nightmare's grip. Lydia hummed a lullaby, ancient and soothing, while Mary tended wounds. Thorpe's snores mingled with rain's rhythm. Holmes stepped to the window, fog pressing against glass like unanswered questions. Grace had pulled them from the abyss, but restoration demanded one final surrender. Who among them would break? Dawn crept in, grey and unforgiving, as a knock echoed, urgent, from the yard. Gregson, breathless. Another body's found, tied to Elias's past. The betrayers struck. Holmes's pulse quickened, pipe clenched. The right tested anew, shadows lengthened even in light. Gregson's knock shattered the fragile peace of the parsonage, like a stone through stained glass. Holmes flung open the door, the chill dawn air rushing in with the inspector's ragged breath. Rain-slicked coat dripping onto the worn rug. Gregson clutched his hat, face ashen under the brim. "Another body's found," he gasped, eyes darting to the gathered faces behind Holmes. "In the old tenement off Whitechapel. Throat slit clean, just like Elias's supposed victims. Note pinned to the chest. The rope remembers." Holmes's mind ignited, synapses firing through the haze of exhaustion. The betrayer moved swiftly, mocking their fragile truce. Elias stumbled forward from his cot, colour draining from his scarred cheeks. "Not again. I confessed it all." "The fire. The rage. It's done." Lydia placed a steadying hand on his arm, her dark eyes fierce. "Lies can't bury truth forever. We've seen Grace at work here." Watson roused fully, moustache bristling as he pulled on his coat. "Details, Gregson. Every shadow." The inspector wiped rain from his brow, voice dropping low. "Victims a vagrant named Silas Crow. No, wait, not our Crow. This one's older. Burn scars matching Elias's tail. Lived in the flat above the blaze that killed Elias's family 12 years back. Pinned note claims Elias escaped the noose to finish his work." Thorpe lumbered in from the kitchen, mug of tea forgotten in his meaty fist. Preposterous. Newgate's records cleared him. This is sabotage, aimed at us all. Holmes paced the dim parlour, pipe unlit between his teeth, the scent of damp wool and peat fire thick in the air. Seeds planted long ago bloomed now, twisted by unseen hands. The child's note burned in his pocket. "Beware the betrayer in plain sight." Crow the forger was jailed, but this reeked of deeper design. Someone who knew the tenement fire's intimate horrors, who profited from Elias's fall. "We go now," Holmes said, grabbing his deerstalker. "Watson, with me. Gregson, seal the scene. Thorpe, guard this house. Elias stays." Elias's haunted eyes pleaded, "No, I face my ghosts." Lydia nodded firmly. "He comes." Redemption's path twists through fire. They plunged into the awakening streets, fog coiling like serpents around gas lamps just flickering to life. Horse hooves splashed through puddles, vendors' cries piercing the murk as the demolition crews hammered at Newgate's distant walls. The prison's groan echoed faintly, a dying beast's lament. The tenement loomed in Whitechapel, a sagging relic of charred timbers and soot-blackened stone, its alleys reeking of refuse and despair. Constables cordoned the entrance, their lanterns casting jittery shadows. Inside the fetid flat, the body sprawled on threadbare floorboards. Silas Grimshaw by the coroner's hasty tag. Throat gashed ear to ear, blood pooled dark and congealed, the air metallic with death's tang. Holmes knelt, magnifying glass tracing the wound's edge. Precise, right-handed, no hesitation. Not a killer's frenzy, but execution. He scanned the room. Overturned chair, scuff marks suggesting struggle, yet no signs of forced entry. The note scrawled in elegant copperplate, "The rope refused, but justice binds eternal." Watson grimaced, hand to mouth against the stench. "Ties to Elias's fire how?" "Grimshaw's scars," Holmes murmured, pointing to faded burns on the corpse's arms. "Witness to the blaze. landlord's man collecting rents while the family burned. Elias's rage birthed there, not murder, but vengeance deferred. Elias hovered in the doorway, fists clenched, breath shallow. I saw him that night, laughing as flames took my wife, my boy. But I never. Gregson interrupted, thrusting a crumpled ledger forward. Found this under the floorboards. Names, dates, bribes to forge records. Thorpe's signature, plain as day. Thorpe? Watson's voice rose, shock rippling through him. Holmes's grey eyes narrowed, pieces slotting with ruthless clarity. The governor's portly frame flashed in memory, his scowl hiding ledgers of corruption, Newgate's underbelly greased for profit. But the betrayal cut deeper. Thorpe had framed Elias, burying the true arsonist to protect his schemes. The fire, insured tenements, Grimshaw the torch. Outside, Thorpe arrived in a hansom, face thunderous. What madness! I cleared his name. Holmes whirled, voice steel. Did you, or did you ignite the blaze? Let Grimshaw swing the match, then pin it on the grieving widower. The child's note saw you, Thorpe. In plain sight, Thorpe's jowls quivered, eyes wild. Lies. I built order from chaos. Elias was broken, a mad dog. The hangings maintained fear, kept the yard off my books. Elias lunged, but Lydia held him back, her widow's calmer anchor. Grace offered you a seat at our table last night. You chose shadows. Gregson snapped irons on Thorpe's wrists, the click echoing like final judgment. Scotland Yard will unravel the rest, but Holmes turned away, pulse steadying as fog lifted slightly, revealing bruised dawn sky. Intellect had pierced the veil, but the heart's wounds lingered. Thorpe's fall exposed not just crime, but the soul's capacity for self-deceit. Reason alone faltered here. Faith's quiet light had guided them through. Back at the parsonage, Mary awaited with hot broth and bandages, her kind eyes weary yet warm. You've unmasked him, she said softly to Holmes, but what of your own chains? Holmes paused, deerstalker in hand, the room's firelight dancing on faces knit by trial. Elias seated, head bowed in muted relief. Lydia humming faintly, a prayer woven into melody. Watson clasping Mary's hand, loyalty deepened by fire's forge. Chains of detachment, Holmes admitted inwardly, the admission foreign as prayer. Cases ended neatly in Baker Street, deductions filed away. But this redemption's weave, demanded surrender. Thorpe's betrayal mirrored his own, observing life without touching its raw pulse. Elias rose, voice rough with unshed tears. I hated you all once, shadows in my pain. But last night's circle, it mended what the rope couldn't kill. Thorpe, dragged away by constables, spat defiance from the threshold. You'll all swing for this. Newgate's secrets die with me. But as the door slammed, silence settled, broken only by rain's softening patter. Community encircled them, Grace's tangible embrace. Holmes felt it stir, a transformation not deduced, but lived. Yet peace felt tentative, dawn's light frail. Watson clapped his shoulder. Rest, old friend. The yard handles the dregs. Holmes nodded, but his piercing gaze lingered on the window, where fog parted to reveal a figure slipping away, a cloaked silhouette too nimble for Thorpe's bulk. The child's note whispered anew, one more. The betrayer had accomplices. Mary poured tea, steam rising like incense. Faith doesn't erase scars, but it binds them into strength. Lydia smiled faintly, linking arms with Elias. We've walked from abyss to this hearth. But tests linger. Elias nodded, eyes clearing. I'll face them clean. As midday sun pierced clouds, casting golden shafts across the parsonage floor, Holmes stepped into the garden behind the house. Neglected roses nodded heavy heads, thorns glinting, a nature's sanctuary amid urban decay. He lit his pipe at last, tobacco's earthy smoke mingling with damp earth. Inner turmoil eased fractionally. The detective glimpsed beyond clues to soul's quiet wars. Watson joined him, military bearing softened by concern. Thorpe's ledgers will bury him. Elias walks free. Free, Holmes echoed, exhaling smoke rings that dissolved like illusions. Yet freedom demands vigilance, that shadow outside. A cry from within shattered reverie. Mary's voice, sharp with alarm. Lydia's collapsed. They rushed back, finding Lydia pale on the settee, clutching her side, blood seeping through her dress. Knife wound fresh, Holmes diagnosed instantly, mind racing. The betrayer's blade struck true from within their circle. Gregson burst in anew, breathless. Thorpe escaped custody, vanished into fog. Armed, raving of unfinished rites. Elias knelt by Lydia, hands trembling as he pressed cloth to the gash. "Hold on." Grace pulled us this far. Holmes's heart clenched. Transformation's fire now rage-tempered. The final test loomed, not in Deduction's realm, but Redemption's crucible. Shadows lengthened anew, even as light strengthened. Watson's steady hands worked sutures, Mary whispering prayers. But Holmes's eyes burned with resolve. The hunt resumed, not for justice's cold logic, but love's fierce guard. Outside, Newgate's hammers fell silent for the lunch hour, the prison's corpse awaiting burial. Within, life's fragile pulse fought on, alliances forged in blood and forgiveness. Yet Thorpe's escape coiled threat tighter, one last hanging threatened, not by rope but hatred's noose. Holmes gripped the windowsill, grey eyes scanning streets where cloaked figures melted into mist. The betrayer's web frayed, but venom lingered. Restoration beckoned, yet demanded sacrifice, one soul's ultimate surrender. As Lydia stirred, whispering thanks, a distant church bell tolled noon, vibrating through bone. Grace's call or warning? The answer hid in twilight's approach. Lydia's eyelids fluttered open, her breath a shallow rasp against the dim light filtering through lace curtains. Holmes turned from the window, his gaunt frame casting a long shadow across the room, where the scent of carbolic soap clung to the air from Watson's hasty ministrations. She managed a faint smile, her scarred hand reaching for Elias, who still knelt beside her, his wild black hair damp with sweat. "You came back to us," Holmes said softly, kneeling to check the bandage himself. Fingers precise yet trembling with unaccustomed vulnerability. The blade missed the vitals by grace alone. Elias nodded, his haunted eyes lifting to meet the detective's. "Grace, or your vigilance. Thorpe's madness ends today. He won't touch her again." Watson straightened, wiping his hands on a towel, his mustache twitching with resolve. Mary's fetched laudanum and broth. "Rest now, Lydia. We've barricaded the doors, but Holmes..." Holmes rose, pipe clenched between teeth, the earthy tobacco grounding his racing mind. Gregson's men scour the alleys from Whitechapel to the Thames. Thorpe's ledgers confessed graft, smuggling opium through Newgate's bowels. But his ravings of rights point deeper. That failed hanging wasn't accident or sabotage. It was invocation, a desperate bid for dark favor. Lydia winced, propping herself up. He spoke of shadows that wouldn't release him. "Elias, you saw it in the cell, the rope coiling like a serpent, refusing the drop. It marked us all." Elias's scarred face hardened, memories flooding back from Newgate's grim yard, where hammers now echoed faintly outside, dismantling the prison's cursed stones. "I felt it pull at my soul, that noose hungry for more than flesh. But light pierced through. Your light, Holmes, and Watson's steady hand." The detective paced, deerstalker discarded on a side table, his piercing grey eyes distant. Deduction falters here. Patterns emerge. Thorpe's bribes timed to full moons, prisoners vanishing before hangings, whispers of occult tomes in his office. Yet the rope's defiance defies physics, frayed by unseen hands. A knock rattled the door, sharp and urgent. Gregson, his rumpled suit dusted with fog-soaked soot, entered with 2 constables, faces grim. Tracked him to the old charnel house beneath St. Sepulchre's. Bells ringing noon marked his path. Ritual, he claims. Armed with a ceremonial dagger, raving of completing the final rite to bind the shadows forever. Holmes snatched his coat, the weight of Ulster familiar yet heavier now. "Lead on, Inspector. No more delays." They moved as one, a ragged fellowship spilling into Marylebone's fog-choked streets, where gas lamps sputtered like dying stars. Horse hooves clattered distant, vendors' cries muffled by the perpetual haze of coal smoke and river mist. Watson supported Lydia, who insisted on coming, her widow's veil shadowing determination. Elias flanked Holmes, the condemned man's stride reborn with purpose. St. Sepulchre's loomed ahead, its weathered spires clawing at low clouds, the churchyard a sanctuary turned crypt amid urban decay. The charnel house squatted below, iron grate pried open, exhaling dank air thick with mould and forgotten bones. Gregson's lantern cast jittery beams down crumbling steps, revealing vaults where plague victims mouldered since the Great Visitation. Holmes descended first, nostrils flaring at the metallic tang of blood mingled with incense. Torchlight flickered ahead. Thorpe, portly form hunched over an altar of cracked stone, surrounded by yellowed parchings and a noose draped like a serpent skin. His slick hair dishevelled, scowl twisted into fanatic gleam. "You!" he snarled as they entered, dagger raised, its blade etched with arcane sigils. The interloper who unravelled my web. The shadows chose Elias for the rope, but it rebelled, demanding purity's sacrifice. Holmes stepped forward, voice steady as steel. "Your shadows are opium dreams and greed, Governor. Ledgers show you profited from condemned men's fears, staging rituals to silence rivals. The rope frayed from sabotage, your own hand trembling in doubt." Thorpe laughed, a guttural bark echoing off bones. "Doubt. I summoned them. Newgate's walls drank screams for centuries. The final hanging was to seal their power, Elias's innocence. A lie. They hungered for his guilt-ridden soul. But you, your rational soul mocks them." Elias surged forward, but Watson held him back, military grip firm. Lydia whispered near the entrance, her pain-fueled insight cutting through. "Harlan, I knew your wife. She prayed for you in her last hours. This isn't power, it's chains." The governor faltered, dagger wavering, eyes flickering with buried grief. "Margaret. She saw the darkness in me first, but the rites promised absolution." Holmes circled, mind weaving threads, the widow's tales of Thorpe's youthful piety shattered by prison corruption, Gregson's overlooked reports of strange lights in the yard. Absolution isn't forged in bone dust altars, Thorpe. It's claimed in surrender. Gregson lunged with cuffs, but Thorpe slashed wildly, blade nicking the inspector's arm. Chaos erupted, lanterns swinging, shadows dancing like imps. Holmes tackled the man, gaunt strength pinning the portly frame, Watson binding wounds with strips from his coat. As constables hauled Thorpe away, his rants dissolving into sobs, Elias knelt by the altar, touching the frayed noose. It felt alive once, pulling me down. Now, just hemp. Outside, the church bell tolled again, resonant through fog, calling faithful to vespers. Lydia leaned on Watson, colour returning to her cheeks. "You've given us back our lives, Holmes." The detective lit his pipe anew, smoke curling heavenward. "Not I. Each choice led here, yours to forgive, Elias to endure, Gregson's to trust beyond ambition." They walked back through twilight streets. Newgate's demolition silhouette stark against bruised sky. Hammers resumed, pounding final nails into history's coffin. Yet Holmes paused at a corner chapel, its door ajar, organ notes spilling soft hymns of restoration. Watson noted the uncharacteristic hesitation. "Going in?" Holmes exhaled, grey eyes softening. "Perhaps. Deduction illuminates facts, faith, the why. Thorpe's fall mirrors my own detachment, observing life's wreckage without touching it. Inside, candlelight-bathed wooden pews, worn smooth by penitence. A vicar nodded welcome as Holmes slid into a back row, Watson and the others following. Elias bowed head, scars illuminated, whispering gratitude. Lydia clasped hands, wound throbbing but spirit mending. Prayers rose. Simple words weaving through stained glass glow, mercy for the fallen, strength for the rising. Holmes listened, inner walls cracking further, transformation's quiet fire kindling where logic once reigned alone. But as they emerged into deepening dusk, a urchin's cry pierced the calm. "Note for Mr. Holmes, from the docks." Thorpe's final words. "The true shadow escapes with the tide." Holmes's pipe dropped ash, resolve reigniting. Not yet over. One last pursuit before true restoration dawns. The group quickened pace toward the Thames, fog thickening like unspoken fears. the river's murmur promising secrets or snares. Grace had carried them this far, but the night's trial loomed, demanding everything: logic, loyalty, and souls laid bare. Fog clung to the Thames like a shroud, thick and oily, swallowing the gas lamp's feeble glow into hazy orbs. The river lapped greedily at weathered pilings, carrying whispers of distant ships and the faint rot of forgotten cargoes. Holmes led the way, his stride purposeful yet measured, pipe clenched between teeth as embers fought the damp. Watson followed close, revolver heavy in his coat pocket, heart pounding not from fear, but the weight of what Grace might demand next. Elias Hawthorne walked with a limp, scars pulling tight in the chill, his haunted eyes scanning shadows as if expecting ghosts from Newgate's cells. Lydia Blackwood clung to Watson's arm, her widow's veil damp against pale cheeks, while Inspector Gregson brought up the rear, lanterns swinging, his cynicism frayed by the day's revelations. They reached the docks near Wapping Stairs, where creaking warehouses loomed like ancient leviathans, their timbers groaning under the tide's relentless push. A lone urchin, no more than 10, darted from behind a crate, thrusting a crumpled note into Holmes's hand before vanishing into the mist. The detective unfolded it under the lantern's light. Words scrawled in Thorpe's trembling hand: "The true shadow escapes with the tide. Meet at the Black Swan Wharf, or the Noose's secret claims another." Holmes's grey eyes narrowed, deduction firing like a well-oiled mechanism. Thorpe, even in disgrace, barters secrets. The Black Swan, smuggler's haunt, 2 wharfs east. But why summon us? A trap, or atonement's final gasp? Gregson spat into the water. "That snake's rotting in a cell. This reeks of his games, buying time till the noose tightens on him come dawn." Elias's voice rasped, low and raw. "No games. He knows the rope's truth. Felt it mock him, same as it did me, that night in Newgate. It wasn't chance. Something refused to let go." Lydia shivered, her hand tightening on Watson's sleeve. Harlan spoke of shadows before the fall. Said they followed him from the cells, hungry for more than flesh. Watson glanced at Holmes, seeing the flicker in his friend's face, not doubt, but a deeper fracture. Logic had unmasked Thorpe's corruption, exposed the frame that sent Elias to the gallows. Yet this shadow lingered, defying reason, echoing the chapel's prayers they had just left. "John, you've seen battlefields where men break not from bullets, but the soul's quiet unraveling. Is this faith's test or madness?" They pressed on, boots sloshing through puddles that mirrored the fog's swirl. The air grew heavier, laced with tar and brine, the river's murmur now a growl. Holmes's mind raced through threads, the rope's inexplicable fray, witnesses vanishing. Thorpe's ledgers hiding bribes from a cabal beyond prison walls. Smugglers ferrying more than opium. Perhaps the true killer escaped justice, pulling strings from the tide's embrace. At Black Swan Wharf, a derelict barge bobbed against slimy mooring posts, its deck shrouded. No lights, no movement, save the faint scrape of rope on wood. Holmes signaled silence, creeping forward, the group fanning out. Watson's pulse thrummed. Loyalty bound him here, but fatherly instinct screamed to shield Lydia, to pull Elias from this abyss. A figure emerged from the barge's gloom. Governor Harlan Thorpe, no longer portly and scowling, but hunched, face gaunt under slicked hair matted with sweat. Shackles clinked on his wrists, guards flanking him, but his eyes burned with desperation. "Holmes, you came. The tide waits for no man." Gregson lunged, but Holmes raised a hand. "Speak, Thorpe. Your note promises truth. The shadow? Who?" Thorpe laughed, a wet, broken sound, glancing at the river as if it might swallow him whole. Not who. What? Newgate's final hanging wasn't failure. It was mercy. The rope. It chose. Elias was innocent, aye, but the killer, tied to something older. Ritual, from the old docks cults, sacrifices to the Thames gods, blood for safe passage. Elias stepped forward, fists clenched. Lies. "I saw you, Doctor the Noose, frame me for the Ripper-like kills." Thorpe's scowl twisted into anguish. "To protect the city. The Shadow's vessel, a boy, my bastard son, twisted by those cults. He killed Holmes, 5 women, throats slit, bodies dumped where the tide claims them. I covered it, sent him abroad on a smuggler's ship. But the rope knew, refused to break for innocence, snapped for the guilty. But that night, fog hid the switch. Lydia gasped, veil slipping. Your son, the one I mourned as lost at sea. Thorpe nodded, tears carving tracks through grime. Lydia, my sister. Forgive. He returns tonight, ship docking eventide, to finish what cults began. Newgate's demolition releases it. Unless... Holmes pieced it, voice steel. Unless we end the cycle. Where's the proof? Thorpe tossed a sodden journal from his pocket, pages curling like dead fish. Manifests, names. The boy's mark, a coiled serpent. But as Gregson snatched it, a cry split the fog. From the river, lights pierced the mist. The ebon tide, hull black as sin, crew silhouettes chanting low guttural tones that chilled bone. Figures hauled crates, but one shape detached. A young man, early 20s, scarred like Elias but eyes feral, serpent tattoo gleaming on neck. The shadow's vessel. He locked eyes with Thorpe, then Holmes' smile predatory. Father. Uncle. The tide brings me home. Panic surged. Guards fired wildly. Shots echoing off water. The young man, let's call him Silas for the journal named him so, leapt to the wharf, knife flashing, not at them but uncoiling rope from the barge, weaving it like a serpent. Elias charged, redemption fueling fury. Not again. The rope won't save you. They clashed amid chaos, fists and cries blending with the tide's roar. Holmes dodged a swipe, mind whirling. The frayed hemp from Newgate, same weave. Silas laughed, voice echoing unnaturally. The river hungers. Newgate's end feeds it. Watson shielded Lydia, firing to cover Gregson cuffing Thorpe anew. But Silas turned on Elias, rope lashing like a whip, drawing blood. Brother in chains, it hissed, join the depths. Holmes lunged, pipe forgotten, tackling Silas into crates that splintered. The journal flew open, pages scattering. Manifests detailing cult rites, Thorpe's bribes silencing witnesses, truth amid wreckage. Silas bucked, eyes wild with zeal. Faith in the old ones, not your chapel god. The rope refused because it serves us. Elias rose, pressing knife to Silas's throat, not to kill but hold. Mercy like they showed me. End it clean. But the tide swelled, barge groaning as if alive. Crew swarmed, fog parting to reveal more shadows. Cultists' faces painted with river mud. Gregson bellowed orders, reinforcements, whistles piercing night. Holmes pinned Silas, breath ragged, detachment shattering. Logic reveals the pattern. Corruption births monsters. But grace. Thorpe's confession, your endurance, Elias, it breaks the chain. Thorpe, shackled, whispered from the barge. Forgive me, Holmes, I chose shadows over light. As constables hauled Silas and crew away, the ebon tide listed, sinking under grapples. Dawn's first grey light clawed the horizon, fog lifting like lifted sin. Yet Holmes paused, journal in hand, staring at the river's now calm surface. Restoration nears, but one truth lingers. Who cut the true rope first? And does the shadow truly drown? Watson clapped his shoulder, voice thick. You've given us more than justice, old chap. A path back. Elias nodded, bloodied but standing tall. Lydia embraced Thorpe briefly, tears falling. Family's wounds heal slow. They turned from the docks, city awakening. But Holmes's pipe relit, eyes distant. The final test awaits, not in depths but hearts. One last revelation before peace claims Newgate's ghosts. The first rays of dawn pierced the thinning fog over the Thames, turning the water to molten silver as Holmes, Watson and the others trudged from the docks. Their boots echoed on slick cobblestones, the city's pulse stirring. Milk carts rattling, vendors hawking their wares in hoarse cries. Elias Hawthorne walked unsteadily, his scarred face pale under the blood-streaked bandage Lydia had tied around his brow. She supported Governor Harlan Thorpe, whose shackles clinked softly, his portly frame slumped, not just from fatigue, but the weight of confessions spilled amid the chaos. Inspector Gregson led the way, barking orders into a whistle that summoned more constables, their lanterns bobbing like fireflies in the grey light. Holmes lagged behind, the journal clutched in his gloved hand, its leather cover damp from the night's spray. His mind raced, piecing fragments, the frayed rope's unnatural weave, Thorpe's bribes traced to cult shipments from the river's underbelly, Silas's ravings of ancient hungers beneath the mud. Logic demanded closure. Yet a thread dangled. Who had severed the gallows rope that night at Newgate, ensuring Elias's impossible survival? Not Silas, captured too late. Not Thorpe, whose cowardice kept him behind walls. The journal hinted at an insider, a shadow within the sanctuary of justice itself. Watson glanced back, his moustache twitching with concern. "Old chap, you look like you've seen the devil himself." "That barge went down clean enough. Cult's playthings drowned with it." Holmes's grey eyes sharpened, pipe clear.